Call this meeting to order as people settle in. Thank you. You got one more? I got 13. Thanks. All right. We got a full house tonight. So the first up on the agenda is public appearances. So for those of you who haven't been here before, you have 3 minutes. I have a clock, and we have 14 speakers this evening. If you need help getting through the aisle, we'll try to make things work as best as possible. So Tom Gross is up first. And maybe I'll just call out the next person is Jackie. Sorry, it's hard to read. Yep. Yeah. So if people want to kind of make their way.
Make sure to put your lights on, and these are not microphones that amplify, but simply record, so speak by.
Okay. Well, thanks for having all of us here.
All right.
Tell me when my time begins.
You're good.
All right. I'm here on behalf of Madison West High School. I have 2 kids that have either graduated there, one's still there, and a senior. And to be frank, I think our facilities are like Goodwill compared to Macy's department stores in other school districts, even in the Big 8, and somewhat even in Madison. So I think the disparity in facilities, quality, and size, and access, and safety are abysmal. I think they are pathetic. And I think compared to other schools, West is, it's just poor. I'm just asking for a Target, not a Macy's. Safety is most concern. I'm a WIA umpire for baseball. And when I've umpired the freshman games over at the field next to the tennis courts, it's somewhat embarrassing that the parents have to actually sit in play. There is no, you can't really draw an out of play right on the foul line. That's the only place that the parents can come and view the games. The outfield and infield has not been rolled, which for those of you that don't know what that means, the football team practices out there and they use their cleats in the fall, and it's muddy and it's wet, and they don't roll it. They don't use the heavy rollers, and if they haven't done it on a regular basis. It is a huge safety concern. The backstop is outdated. It's got metal I-beam girders in it. Any foul balls hit there and come directly down. When I've umpired behind the plate, I actually wear a hard helmet. It's the only place that I do that. There's not enough fan space. All the foul balls go into the tennis court. They have hit players even during tournaments or in matches with other schools. I'm going to let my other parents talk about the pool conditions, but commuting for practices and times, they're not fair. That our kids have to drive somewhere to practice or to play. I believe that arguably West has the greatest space needs and improvement needs of all the schools. It's the 5th largest school in the state of Wisconsin, and it's sad.
Thank you. All right, Jackie.
Ready to go?
Yep.
Okay, my name is Jackie Bastier Cooper. I'm also a West parent. I'm also heavily involved with the Madison West Athletic Booster Association. I'm here also talking about the facilities proposal for West High School and specifically the athletics. West should be provided with facilities that are equitable to the other 3 high schools in the district. The goal plan of the proposal is a starting point for West, but we need a lot more than that to become equitable with the other schools so that our student athletes can feel like the other schools' athletes as well. West does not have a field house. It has a main gym that is not a field house. The other 3 high schools have a field house. With the gold plan, a desperately needed new pool will be built at West. A field house could be built on top of that pool. A field house would not only give West more space for athletics, it would give also provide space for classes as well as revenue generating activities for MSCR on the near west side of the city. West has little to no practice space for the majority of our sports. Did you know that the track and field student athletes are currently practicing in the cemetery near West? That's the only space they have. It's not safe. It's not designed for athletic use. Track has to use money from their budget to bus their student athletes to Memorial to practice 2 days a week on a track and for the field events. Did you know that the 115 student athletes on the Falls boys soccer program had to travel to 3 different locations for practices? This is a program that has qualified for the state tournament in 2 of the past 4 years, but numerous student athletes have dealt with serious shin splint and other injuries due to the grass fields where they practice. Because it's like practicing on cement, there's no maintenance done to any of these grass fields. West is well behind the other high schools when it comes to athletic facilities. I'm asking the board that when you are looking at these proposals to please think about equitable solutions for West so that students at all 4 high schools are provided with the same opportunities. Thank you.
Thank you. Sarah Anderson. And up after Sarah is Jane Feller.
I'm I'm also here on behalf of Madison West High School. And I'm going to let other people talk about the pool, but I would like to talk about the transportation costs, and if we did have upgraded facilities, that we wouldn't have to use our athletic budget for all of that. I understand all the schools have transportation costs, but our budget in the fall, 72.8% of it was spent on transportation. And that isn't to go to Memorial for a match, because we don't bus our kids from West to Memorial. We make them meet there, so we don't have to spend the money on the buses. If we had more money in our budget to do things for our school to make it better, we wouldn't have these transportation costs. And to offset what we spend on transportation, all the other high schools have the ability to spend that on their program, and we don't. We got like about $3,000 more this year. 2 years ago, we got $25,000 more. I don't know why it went back down for our full budget for athletics, but it did, which means we're spending. Memorial's able to take a coach bus to some things. We're not. We can't afford to do that. We don't have the money to do that. So if we were able to practice soccer on an actual turf field that they play their games on at our school, instead of paying to bus to somewhere else to actually have practice on the field that they play their games in, at all Big 8 schools, it would be huge for our soccer team. I don't even play soccer, but I'm trying to talk about something other than the pool. And then the one other last thing is my daughter did 3 sports at West High School her freshman year. She did cross country, gymnastics, and track, and not one of them she competed at Madison West, because we don't have a field house. We don't have room for wrestling, gymnastics, basketball in the winter time. So she has to go to Memorial. Memorial gets first pick in everything when they have practice over break, so they're always stuck with the practice time that isn't ideal for kids on Christmas break. They practice from 8 to 10. Memorial takes the 10 to 12 spot every single time. And I fear that that's because in the last 3 or 5 years, we've had 6 athletic directors, and we haven't had anybody representing Madison West. And that's what we're trying to do.
Thank you.
Yep.
Jane, and after Jane is Joni Messner.
Hi, I'm Jane Feller, here for West. When I first moved to the district 17 years ago, I decided to take a swim at the West Pool. I was astonished. It was so tiny, dark, and the locker rooms were dismal. And I knew we were going to be swimmers, and I thought, this is great. By the time my 5-year-old gets there, clearly they'll have a new facility because this must be 50 years old. I was wrong. I'm not only a West parent, I'm also a mechanical engineer, and I sympathize with the financial constraints the district has been under. So I'm thrilled that there's a referendum that wants to start to address the long overdue need for investments at the West facilities. But as you look at your options for this referendum, I really encourage you to look at the pool. Start by looking at some outlying districts. If you haven't been anywhere to see them, I'd try Middleton or Sun Prairie. They're not Cadillacs, but they're nice facilities, plenty of room for seating. They both have diving wells. Then do a tour of the pools in the Madison School District. Please save West for last. When you get there, if you haven't seen it already, you will be astonished by the disparity between our pool and the other pools in our district. The first thing you'll see is that there is no deck space. Spectators sit on a couple of wooden benches up against the sidewall. If it's a big crowd, we get creative. We pull the benches out about a foot and some skinny people stand behind them. Of course, this makes for a smaller egress aisle, and we have a risk of people actually falling in the pool, to be honest. By the way, this constraint of deck space and no spectator seating means that we travel for most of our meets, incurring larger travel expenses, which Sarah already talked about a bit. If you keep looking, you'll notice that the pool itself is small. There are 6 lanes, but they are not very wide lanes. They are not even standard width. Rumor has it the pool was designed as a 5-lane pool, but when they realized you needed 6 for any competition, they made do. Our boys team, and our girls too, I believe, has to limit the number of athletes because they're literally too big to fit into the lanes of the pool. We are unable to host meets with sizable teams. Our poor divers don't even have a place to practice, much less compete. They go to Middleton to even practice. If you spend more time there, you'll realize that the air quality is abysmal. Our athletes without fail have issues year after year with illness with that. But it's not time for Band-Aids anymore. It's time for a new pool. Madison's a huge swimming community. I know of at least one student athlete who transferred out of the West District based on a better swimming opportunity elsewhere. I'm sure the West Pool was part of that equation. I realize a new pool is a big ticket item, and from the perspective of the entire plan might seem like a prime candidate to take a pass on, but please use this opportunity to go for the full replacement. As Jackie said, the gold package is a bare minimum to get started to bring West up to parity with the other schools in our district. West, more than any other school, has been sorely neglected in terms of capital investments. So please make this investment for our student athletes. Thank you.
Joni Messner, and following Joni is Todd Jekyll.
Are you ready?
Yep.
Okay, I'm Joni Messner. I have 2 girls at West, 1 boy that graduated and 1 coming. I'm a West High School graduate from the late 80s, and I'm also here about the West Athletic Facilities. Sorry, I didn't say that. I'm sad to see the state of West High School athletic facilities. It's very much the same as when I was a student there. Graduated in '87, so it's a long time coming for facility upgrade. For safety concerns and to get West High School on equal playing ground in order to fairly compete in the Big 8, West High School is in dire need of new athletic facilities overall. We are on our 4th athletic director plus 3 interim ADs since the abrupt firing of Sandy Botham 4 years ago. And so we have not had anyone advocating for our school in that time, or for our athletic program. We're asking MMSD to please look closely at West High School when you're making these choices. As there's a few things I want to talk about to reevaluate the current proposal dollar amounts and consider a substantial increase to the gold. Maybe West could have a platinum. 3 areas to investigate further if you're looking closer at West are the demographics. West High School has by far the most students when compared to the other 3 schools, and the smallest acreage. Thus, the current facilities are overused for sports and PE classes, in addition to the fact that we have not had any athletic facility upgrade in many years compared to the other 3 schools. As Sarah spoke about, the other schools all have field houses. We don't. Our pool is suffering. We've already heard about that, and we'll hear more about that. We need a creative reconfiguration of the entire facility. Our practice facilities and equality are a huge issue. Sarah briefly talked about that too. We're lacking an updated practice facility, so we have hundreds of teenage drivers driving all over the city just to practice their sport, and it's just not safe. In addition to the host school will often get first dibs on practice. Their times, they usually get the best time, so our kids go later, which affects their busy lives. You know, they're already trying to fit in studying and everything up. They're up late for practices at other schools. The sports from West High School that travel that I know of just for practices are swimming for dry land due to no gym space, soccer, gymnastics, track, football, basketball, hockey for dry land due to no gym space, baseball, and diving. And that's just the ones I could think of. Lastly, the future of West High School, I think, is at stake. I know many local families that either send their kids to Edgewood or move out of MMSD or the West area to give their kids a better high school athletic opportunity, and that to me is really sad. That effectively directs our students, their teachers, the community, and our district. And I think we all know and are aware of the direct positive relationship between scholastic performance and participation in sports. So I think that should be considered. Thank you.
Thank you. Todd Jekyll, and following Todd is Gary Mahoney.
I'm Todd Jekyll. I'm here representing West High. We're doing a shock and awe, apparently. Focus primarily on the athletics because all 3 of my kids, one of which is a senior now, the other 2 are recent graduates, participated in multiple sports at West. And they all swam, so we get to hear about the pool one more time. And I'd like to focus on one different thing. I agree with everything that has been said so far. The pool is inadequate in almost any measure. It has water, and it's the correct length, and that's about it, okay? And what we'd like to have is something that is functional for its purpose, and that's not just lap swimming. It's hosting an event, and we currently can't do that, to the point that our kids rarely get to swim at a home meet. And when they do, I mean, we had a pretty big dual meet not so long ago against the number one, number two, and many of the visiting families stayed away because there's nowhere to sit. They know there's nowhere to sit. You want to get a seat, you're there at least an hour, sometimes longer before the meet, just to get a seat. And I always like to say that the swimmers are only marginally wetter than the spectators. Okay? So, all right, maybe that's not a big deal to you hosting a swim meet, but I think it is for the kids. Okay? And it is for the parents. We all love watching our kids compete, and seeing people standing in the halls, craning in so they can just see the event that their kid in is really it's a little heartbreaking for me because I love watching my kids compete. So, you know, there's the discussion about levels, and pool appears in every level for West High School. I think that's saying something about the fact that it is a need. I'm just telling you that a half measure doesn't fix the West pool. You really need to start over. You can't fix the lack of space. Okay, so maybe you agree with me, maybe you think hosting a swim meet isn't important, or maybe you see an option like building a shared use off-site facility that both West and Memorial can use, maybe split the difference between them. They're relatively close, right? Well, that might work for Memorial because their kids can get done with their practice, which is a couple times a week before school. They can get in their cars, they can go get a parking spot and get to their class on time. That is not reality at West High School. We have our morning practices. We get there early enough that they can find on-street parking. That's not going to be the case if they were asked to practice off-site and come to the school just before school starts. So even though it sounds like a great thing, sounds like a way of tackling two big issues with one project, it doesn't really work for West High School. So I know these aren't the only issues that we have at West, and I realize that all schools have their own uniqueness and their own issues. It's just the two that I know the best. So thank you for your attention.
Thank you. Gary Mahoney, and following that is Amanda Elmaner. Sorry if I'm... Thank you.
Thank you. I'm Gary Mahoney. I want to thank MMSD and the board for your efforts towards the 2020 referendum. As you know, it's much needed and long overdue. I'm also a West grad and the current president of the Booster Club. I'm a proud parent of third-generation regents. I would ask that you engage a larger audience earlier in this planning process, district-wide, to include alumni, elementary and middle school families, booster clubs, involve the stakeholders who will ultimately help us get this referendum approved. I did share high school outdoor athletic facility matrix that you've probably seen before. To me, that's the poster child for improvements at West High. As you heard, we don't have a field house. The Stevens Gym is our main gym. It's not a field house. We don't have a track. Our pool is arguably the worst in the district and the conference. Most of our student athletes travel not only for games, but for practices as well. And from a time management perspective, that's far from ideal. Our transportation costs are much higher than all the other district schools. We have minimal parking, not even enough for staff, certainly not for any of our students. Specifically, some of the West High plans that we've been working on, we'd like to have the ability to negotiate with the D'Arienzo Monuments property owner at the corner of Regent and Highland. That would give us the ability to expand the footprint, where we'd like to build our new pool at ground level and a field house at the Regent Street level up above. We'd also hope to add turf fields and a track to enable more of our student athletes to practice at West. And questioning the need for a welcome center, currently there's one shown at the Ash Street entrance. If it must be there, it has to fit with our classic 1930 facade. We'd also like to have you explore structured parking on the school site, not west of Highland. We have to preserve what little field space that we have. I'm also here to tell you that sports matter. It makes a huge difference in the lives of our student athletes and the entire student body. There should be a wellness component, involve PE, MSCR, and community-wide. It keeps our student athletes engaged. They perform better academically. They're taught life skills, teamwork, dedication, perseverance. They develop friendships and memories to last a lifetime. We need to build on our rich tradition. You ask for Rick Olson at La Follette, a Pat Richter at East, a Mark Johnson from Memorial, or Eric Hayden from West. I'm quite sure they would tell you our students benefit greatly by participating in athletics. Commitment to athletics is critical in order to maintain and strengthen enrollment. Our kids are students first and foremost, and we understand that. It's also critical to upgrade infrastructure and classrooms in order to retain and attract top quality teachers and support staff. So in closing, please go for the gold and beyond. Thank you.
Thank you. Amanda, and following Amanda is Terry Gross.
All right, I'm Amanda Elmaker. I'm a teacher at West, and I'm also the head coach of the girls team and the boys team. I'm also going to talk about our facility and our pool specifically. As a coach, my two biggest concerns are safety and not allowing all the student athletes to participate in a team that they would like to. First, safety, as you heard, our pool is very small. I actually measured the lanes today. They are a little over 5.5 feet wide. The average lane is a little bit more than 6 to 7 feet. So that may not be a lot for one lane, but if you think about 6 lanes or having an 8-lane pool like the majority of the pools that we compete in, that's a lot. Pools are between 45 and 60 feet wide. Ours is 35 feet wide. We are trying to do the best that we can in our 6-lane pool. Kids are constantly hitting their hands on each other. I heard that there was a girl my age that went to West that broke her hand at practice because they were swimming hard and competing, and we don't have the space to have an actual practice at West. 2 of the 4 strokes, butterfly and breaststroke, are wider strokes. We can't practice. We can't do those strokes at practice when the whole team is there because we do not have the space, or we'd have to have less swimmers on the team. So as a head coach, I'm trying to do my best to ensure and let as many kids on the team as possible. But also, as people talked about with our deck space, one side of the pool is about 3.5 feet wide. The other one is 7.5. So there is no deck space to even be creative with workouts by splitting swimmers up and doing body weight exercises or any strengthening on deck while another group is swimming, because as soon as people are in the water, like Todd said, the whole deck is soaking wet, which becomes a bigger safety issue for having kids try and do push-ups or sit-ups or squats on the soaking wet deck. Also, with our current limitations, I have to cut swimmers every single year. I cut between 5 and 10 swimmers per group. So I've already coached West, or the girls team, 4 years, so I've probably cut between 20 and 40 swimmers. And also, the Madison community is a really strong swimming community, probably one of the strongest in the nation. We have all city, I'm not sure if you guys are aware of that, but about 2,500 swimmers swim each summer and get that experience of being on a team and being a part of something bigger than themselves, and find joy and find themselves on their summer team and enjoy that. And I have emails every single year. I'm already getting emails for the girls team about being worried about being cut on a team, but they really want to be on it because they love the sport and they love being a part of a community. And what can they do to get better than the other people so they don't get cut, which is really unfortunate. I think we are actually us in Memorial are one of the only teams that have to cut because we have such a strong community and space limitations.
Thank you.
How to finish it up.
Terry, and followed by James Schock.
I'm Terry Gross. I'm a West parent here to support the gold package and beyond, for specifically speaking about athletics and experience that I've had with my 2 kids. One's graduated, one's a senior. So I've had a softball player, a swimmer, and a baseball player and a basketball player. And I see sports at West as a great way to unify the school. We have a diverse student population, and I think having a strong sports program is going to unify the students, the city, and beyond. So I think that's really what I see here. Things that we experience personally, not having a field house, our kids again can't have their own indoor practice during this time of year. They're supposed to be practicing softball and baseball, can't do it outside, so they have to compete with MSCR, pay for their own space, raise money to be able to practice. and then also, again, the traveling to other schools for practice because we only have one baseball field, no softball field. So that's the it's one of the things we experienced there. Also, I mean, if you've ever been to a West basketball game, you've seen the bleachers, and you kind of take your life into your own hands walking up those bleachers. And then the final thing is the swim pool. We're all saying how important this is, and we can't just fix what's there. It's got to be something new. No one's talked about the locker rooms yet. 3 showers for 40 girls. They have to bring their own dehumidifiers. They have to walk by an outside door when they're going from the pool to the locker room. It's just a really poor setup. And so that's really, I just wanted to give you my experience and perspective, and I hope that you'll consider this for the future of our city.
Thank you. James, followed by Molly Messner.
Hi, my name's James. I'm a senior at Madison West High School, and I've been on the swim team all 4 years, so I'm here to talk about the pool again. So you don't need to know anything about swimming or pools to walk into the pool and realize that it's instantly pathetic. There's minimal deck space to even walk on the side of the pool, and when we have swim meets there, they hand out kickboards so that the people on the side can put the kickboards next to their feet, so that when the water splashes, they don't get their shoes and their pants wet, which is ridiculous. That should not be happening at our school, especially considering that our swim teams are some of the best in the state. We have a girl that consistently ranks among best in the state on the girls swim team, and the guys swim team has gotten first 2 times in the last 4 years and was second my freshman year. So it's almost insulting that we have one of the worst pools I've ever swam in my life. And then, as we've talked about briefly, the locker rooms aren't really any better than the pool. The girls only have 3 showers, and then they're always jealous of the guys, because we have maybe 10 showers, but we have 35 guys on the team, or like 30-ish. And it's one of those sports where it's really necessary to shower too, because we have practice in the morning before school. So we can't really make do with the low quality showers that we have now. And there's a door right by the pool that goes right straight to the outside, and that's horrible whenever people open that door while we're practicing, because it'll be like 0 degrees outside, and somebody will open that door, and then all this cold winter air will come straight into the pool, and we're all like in the water fairly close, so that's horrible. And then there's the air quality that everybody complains about all the time. During swim season, I need to take an inhaler twice in the morning and twice at night, and that's just to make sure that I don't start coughing whenever I yawn. And I'm not even being overly dramatic about it. That's a lot of the kids' experiences. You could ask anybody that swam for West in the last 10, maybe 20 years, and they'd agree. And actually, going off that, there is a dad on the swim team that swam at West in the late 80s, and we were looking at a swim team picture, and they take the picture every year in the pool area. And the pool area looked exactly the same in 1985 as it looks now in 2019. And then a few weeks later, I saw a picture of the pool in, I think, like the 1960s. And it looked exactly the same then. The only difference is that back then we had windows, and now we don't have windows anymore. So we're in there for 4 hours every day in a windowless room, which is depressing considering it's winter. So, yeah, and then going off the lane size, there was one time we had a swim meet, and it was we were ranked as the #1 team in Division 1, and then we were against the #1 team in Division 2. And it was, my friend was racing this guy from Monona Grove, and they were swimming the butterfly. They were both going the same direction in different lanes, but they both hit each other's hands while they were racing, which is ridiculous, especially considering that they're some of the best athletes in the entire state. They both plan on swimming D1 in college, so that was just ridiculous. Thank you.
Thank you. Molly Messner, followed by Kate Messner.
Hi, I'm another student athlete from West. I'm a senior this year, and I swim on the West women's swim team for the past 4 years. And I'd just like to talk about the locker room and pool space again, especially in the locker rooms for the girls team. This year there was 3 showers. Last year I think there might have been 4 showers that worked. Showers are especially important for a sport, because if you don't shower before you get in the pool, like for girls at least, like lotion, makeup, whatever, like body oils get in the pool and contribute to the terrible air quality. And in past years, the air quality has suffered from the UV lights that help filter the pool, like etc. In the pool, there's tiles that are broken, falling off the wall. The vents don't stay on the wall. The lanes get broken all the time. I've had coaches from other swim teams trying to fix the lane lines so that there's enough lane lines to fit in the pool. Many of the girls in the swim team have to bring extra towels in to put in the lockers because the bottom of the lockers are like so rusted that they like fall through into the ground. But if you don't put towels over them, cockroaches or mice, rats will come through and like get into our swim team bags and such. One of my friends found cockroaches in her car that had gotten into her swim bag, and that's disgusting. Many times during swim team practice when we're swimming, you can see into the lower part of the pool, dead bugs, Band-Aids. A lot of times the pool isn't cleaned. When you're swimming, another issue is that there's not enough space, like the lane size again. But with our pool, the part of the wall comes over more, so even if you're in the inside lanes, you're still hitting people's arms, but then if you're also in the outside lanes, then it feels even smaller because there's not enough space for you. Back to the locker rooms, sometimes, right now I believe the sink is still not fixed, but we had one sink and we have 2 toilets. A lot of times one of the toilets didn't work, so we had 1 toilet for 35 girls or so. And yeah, next.
Thank you. Kate Mester, followed by Matt Duchemin.
Okay, I'm Kate Mester. I'm a swimmer at West for the girls swim team, and I'm here to talk about the pool. So one of the biggest things that affects me when I'm swimming in the pool is I'm a flyer, so my stroke is pretty wide. And like a bunch of people have said before, the lanes are only like 5 feet. 5 feet. My wingspan is much larger than, or almost as large as that, so when I'm doing fly, I'm touching both lane lines. When we swim, we have to go, it's circle swimming, so you have to, one swimmer goes down, the other one comes around, so I'm hitting people or I'm getting hit or I have to swim like this, which is affecting my shoulders and can cause injuries for a lot of the swimmers I know that they either swim breaststroke or fly, and even backstroke in the end lanes. Like my sister just said, the end lanes come up, so when you're doing backstroke, you can't even swim your stroke, which defeats the purpose of even practicing. Practicing in that pool it's just bad. Like, you really just can't do your stroke. Doing dry land, we cannot do it at all in the pool because there's not enough deck space. Like Amanda, my coach, earlier said, there's 3 feet on one side and 7 feet on the other. You're not able to do dry land, which I know all of the other teams in our district can do dry land on their deck, so they don't need to go to like other places to do their dry land. That brings in all the transportation costs, and like just having have the upperclassmen on our team drive the underclassmen, because I'm a sophomore and I was a freshman, having to drive us to practices so we can practice, and I just feel like that's just not fair for us to have to go somewhere else. It takes more time. It takes away from the rest of the time that we should be able to have to sleep, eat, study, or even just like live our lives. The other thing is in the locker rooms. The locker rooms are absolutely disgusting. I know for the boys and girls. The lockers themselves are all rusted. Like it was said before, the bottom of all of the lockers in the girls' locker room have rusted out and they fell through. And cockroaches, rats, any like disgusting little silver bugs, they come through and they eat the food in there. They chew through towels. it's like that's where our space is to get ready in the morning before we go to school and try to learn, and that's like making another roadblock. The other thing is that the showers in our shower do not work. They're too short, and I don't think any of the girls can like actually shower in them. We all have to like sit down on the ground or like lean against the wall to shower in them. 3 of them worked. I'm pretty sure there's probably like 12 or 15 showers in there, and none of them worked. The toilets don't work. Either they don't flush or they just will like flood the bathroom. It's disgusting. And then also the sinks don't work. Something to take into consideration.
Thank you. Matt, followed by Chris Gomez-Schmidt.
Hi there, my name is Matt Dushman. I feel like a little baby Madisonian after I've heard everyone, because I've only lived here since 2005 in the West District. I have a son who's a sophomore at West now, and a daughter who's a 7th grader at Hamilton. And you could assume everything I would say would be pro-West, and pro-West over the other high schools. Nothing against them, but it's all pro-West. But my point I wanted to make was a little bit broader. I actually read through all 4 of the Zimmerman proposals that you all presumably had to read through as well. I'm sorry for that. And I was really stunned, actually. I was stunned in particular about how much deferred maintenance and pure capital improvement you guys are being asked to recommend to the voters. And my biggest concern is that that will overshadow athletics for all the schools. And I don't want you to do that. I'm here to ask you to, I guess, have the courage, don't be afraid to allocate enough money to make the athletic improvements. I will do everything in my power to advocate to everyone I know for a proposal that emphasizes athletics and to vote in favor of it. The reason being, and I think maybe it'd be hard to argue some of this, but I went through and I looked at the MMSD goals: excellence, belonging, racial equality, voice, focus, creativity. And I can't think of one that isn't met by a strong athletic program. I just picked out a couple that I thought I would mention. Excellence, right? There are studies. On Google for a half an hour you can poke around, and there are peer-reviewed studies that talk about athletics creating excellence, athletics demonstrating years later more leadership, more self-confidence, more self-respect, higher career status, more pro-social behavior from athletes than non-athletes, more volunteer time, more charitable donations. These are exactly the types of things that presumably we want to encourage and support. Belonging. I think there's a vastly understated benefit of having a school community get together for an athletic event. You can't really quantify that, but it happens, and I'll tell a story at the end about my daughter and how I thought that was important. Racial equality. I think that's another thing that people often don't want to talk about, but I come from Eau Claire, Wisconsin, which was a much more homogeneous community, especially in the 1970s when I was growing up. And to me, seeing my son, he's a hockey player, so he's the only team that doesn't need any facilities, I guess, from the school. So, but he's a hockey player, and I saw him join a hockey team that has at least 4 different races on a hockey team. And to me, coming from Eau Claire, that was a great thing to be proud of. Can I say my daughter real quickly?
Yep.
We're at Blessed Sacrament School. We decided to switch to Hamilton because she got to meet a group of people, the Messners among them, at local West sporting events. She got to know those people and decided, you know what, Blessed Sacrament's great, but these are the people I want to spend my high school time with, and we're moving over to Hamilton. So I think that's just one example of how athletics can bring people together. Thanks.
Thank you. Chris, and then last is Denise.
Hi there. I'm here to talk about the budget. I'm not here to talk about West Athletics, although I support what you all are saying and the need to upgrade facilities. So thank you for your work on that. I'm actually here to talk about the Office of Civil Rights resolution that was signed in 2016 to address disparities in access to and preparation for advanced coursework for Black and Latino students. And as part of this resolution, The District Advanced Learning Advisory Committee was tasked with researching, discussing, and basically coming up with the root causes of these disparities, trying to really dig into that, and devising a set of recommendations for the district to address these disparities. I'm here to highlight a few of those recommendations that specifically have a budget ask around them. There's about 10 recommendations. I'm just going to read off 2 of them. Just to let you know, I'm not here representing the committee. We don't exactly have a structure in our committee to do that, but I am a member of the advisory committee, so I'm here to share those with you today. The first recommendation is under the root cause of funding, and it says we recommend a baseline of 1.0 FTE advanced learning specialist at each elementary and middle school, with additional allocation available to schools based on advanced learning and talent development needs as defined in the 2017 to 20 AL plan. Just to let you know, there is currently a half-time advanced learning specialist at every elementary and middle school. So this would be an addition of a minimum of 22 advanced learning staff. The other funding recommendation is that we recommend that the district articulate a strategy for sustaining advanced learning identification and supports through the middle to high school transition and throughout high school, including supporting connections to post-secondary options. We recommend that this strategy is directly linked to the continuation of the work and internal capacity building with equal opportunity schools. And that is the consulting firm that the district has been using to do the work looking at disparity specifically in AP coursework at the high school level. Right now, currently, there are no advanced learning staff assigned to the high schools. All of that work is done by the advanced learning director, who also oversees the rest of the work done throughout the whole district. I guess I'd just like to say that the 23 FTE increase is a lot. I mean, it basically doubles the advanced learning staff. And it's a lot to ask when there are a lot of needs in a lot of other areas. But I'm asking you to really seriously consider this. There are a lot of students, and this is a serious equity issue. I want to thank you for adding it to the equity, the strategy equity things that you're going to look at today. It's under the other category. And so I hope it'll be part of your discussion. And the advisory committee really wants to work with you going forward on how we can really dig into these disparities and fix them for the long term. So thank you.
And then last up is Denise, and I can't quite read the last name.
Hello.
Thank you.
I have my own clock.
Great.
Yeah, I can't see that far. Shoot. Okay. I'm here tonight. Oh, by the way, I'm Denise Hetrick. I'm a retired teacher from the Madison Public Schools. I used to work for you all. So I'm in a somewhat different capacity. I'm now just a retired teacher who is also a lifelong Madisonian and taxpayer who is invested in this community and our kids. So I'm here to speak specifically to the issues of opportunity youth and alt-ed that were discussed last week at the meeting. As a tax-paying Madisonian who cares about this place, our residents, and most importantly, the students in our public schools. So starting with the good, Dean. Thank you for your statement last week to the effect that all students should have more opportunities and choices, and that we need to stop looking at alternatives as places only for students who have issues. Thank you for putting out there that we need to be working in concert with community partners and resources. You stopped short of stating my dream. Operation Fresh Start, or South Madison College, is a location for a vocational high school in Madison. Long overdue. In case you did not already know this, students in Wisconsin may apprentice in cosmetology and auto starting at the age of 16. We need to think about this seriously, and how awesome the opportunity to exit high school to a family-supporting career would be for many of our students. As you said, we have STEM at South Madison College presently. That is not the only option we could have there, nor is South Madison College the only place where we could have STEM as one of our strands. Operation Fresh Start and/or Capitol High would be great campuses for alternative education and/or opportunity youth, and you would not need to pay rent or build a new campus. Now the bad. Based on what Paris presented in terms of what has been done in terms of Opportunity Youth this year and the budget request for the next 2 years, I'm deeply concerned. Maybe I missed it, but it would appear that nothing substantial has been done, no partnerships have been established, and no students have been recovered. This is not acceptable to me. Another cohort of students has been lost to the abyss. I feel like, in addition, the number of students is grossly miscalculated because dashboard students are enrolled. What about the dropouts? I'm also concerned that it appears that some Board of Education members are under the impression that all alt-ed students and/or Opportunity Youth are receiving special education. And I got this impression from the rather long discussion about waiting lists. As you know, there are Opportunity Youth and general education, and in my opinion, this is where the problems are. They have enrollment deadlines and caps and no rolling start dates. This is how we lose students. Students in general ed cannot be denied a school placement either, nor can they legally be waitlisted without services. In other words, going really fast, they would need to be allowed to attend their school of districting, and this is problematic for, in particular, Opportunity Youth because, as we all know, big box comprehensive high schools do not work for everyone. I'm disturbed by the lack of urgency that I perceived around Opportunity Youth. I'm concerned about an Opportunity Youth office that is not directly connected to the students it is supposed to serve for any amount of money. It bears repeating that all of the students are all of our students. We have to take care of all of them. Right is never wrong. Taking care of kids is what we do because it is the right thing to do. We have to start treating them as if they were our own personal children, and what would we want for them if they were? I'm serious. What are we waiting for?
Thank you, and thank you to everyone who spoke this evening. The next thing on the agenda is approval of the minutes. It is recommended to approve the minutes from the Operations Work Group meeting dated October 22nd, 2018. Imad, your advisory vote? All in favor? Any opposed? All right, that passes 7-0. All right, so we have two meaty discussions this evening. And Kelly, if you want to come up with your team. The first topic of discussion is budget, as it will be for the foreseeable future. And just for the board, I think we're going to try to get through the majority of this before kind of stop pausing for questions. And then there's a healthcare section, and we'll do that separately. So we'll do kind of two discussions.
All right, you got it. All right, thanks everyone for having us tonight. Our objectives for this evening are to work on honing in on our final budget in preparation for the draft preliminary budget that we would release at the end of April. So our main topics for tonight are the strategic equity projects and our healthcare discussion, as Kate just mentioned. You've seen our timeline previously, so we're in March, focusing in on some of our last moving rocks of the budget before we create our official draft to release to the public, which we will do in April. After the April phase then becomes the phase of the budget that's more community facing, where we look for feedback from the community through May, and we take any possible amendments that might come from individual board members for further discussion through the May and June timeline. Also hoping we get a little information from the state, or at least a couple cues by the end of June, ultimately for the board vote on the draft preliminary at the end of June. We have our budget planning approach in front of you on the screen. Today we're focusing on the last two bullets. This is our work leading into April, and then again after we release that draft budget book, we essentially go back through these bullets to reconfirm where we are at and what we know by June. Before we begin any big budget discussion, we always want to make sure we put our goals in the room for this year. This particular presentation is going to be heavily focused on that last bullet, investing in a focused set of priorities. I'm really proud of the work, and that we do seem to have two themes relating to the focused set of priorities that we'll have in the upcoming conversation. The first theme really being supporting programs that support students with the greatest need. The second theme primarily being to focus on the staff, high quality and diverse staff that also relate to some of our students with highest needs. On our guiding principles, similarly, this is the work we focus on for the entire year, but tonight we'll be looking to focus in on the multi-year long-range perspective thinking and building on those previous practices that are showing promise for the future. To kind of hone in and remind everyone where we are on our high-level budget strategy, we are holding on the revenue estimate, which we anticipate at this point in time to have new revenue of $9.7 million, of which then get dispersed among the priorities of the district. We have our 2% built in for the steps and lanes for our staff and the 0.5 base wage currently built into the budget, waiting on hold then for the rest of our information from the state on those two categories. Our staffing plan is largely complete with our workbooks out in schools and our HR process underway. Tonight, focusing on the last three items, the strategic equity actions, our healthcare, and any budgetary required allowances that are needed. So in January, we made a set of assumptions, and we put some numbers out there of where those assumptions would lead. We are largely within that same conversation that we had back in January. Tonight, just solidifying the items in yellow that we haven't yet gone into great detail on. So we'll start off the conversation looking at the budget allowances. Budget allowances is something that we do every year in the budget. It's funding those things that we know we need to fund year after year based on either contractual commitments, legal or law-based requirements to fund, or board plans or policies that have been previously approved. Some of the bullets you'll see here are every year occurrences. For example, the open enrollment estimate this year is an increase of $200,000. But I do want to pause on that because this is actually a good news budget number for us. Just a couple years ago, we were budgeting as much as $400,000 for open enrollment increases. Due to open enrollment into the district, we've started to see some trends move in the favor of the district. So I wanted to make sure we highlighted that. We always have to budget for increases such as property insurance, district liability, and or I mentioned contracts, leases, utilities. Our 4K providers, for example, built into that contract is a 2% increase per year. I'll answer that question, Nikki, you got it. And then our retiree health benefits do go up every year. That is not part of what's baked into the budget at the $2.5 million that Rochelle and Deirdre will talk about in just a minute. To answer Nikki's question on the E-rate program, it's a federal program that essentially says for every dollar we spend on technology infrastructure, the core foundation of the infrastructure, what exists in the basement of this building, for every dollar we spend, we get reimbursed 80%. So the $100,000 you see up there kind of is the 20% that we fund, and then the remaining, the feds come back and reimburse us. It's probably our last year in 1920 of this particular program, so we're gonna, use the extent of that free money that we can. So that's what's built in there. We had it built in for this year's budget as well. And last but definitely not least, built into this part of the budget for us for this year is our technology plan. This plan has baked into, for rolling out G5, a $625,000 increase. That was part of the original technology plan growth. 2021 would be G6, which is our last cohort rollout. I wanted to make sure the board knew that there was some really great work happening over the last number of months, but particularly in the last 30 to 45 days around the technology plan. TJ has been pressing for us for a number of years now to move to a 4-year lease cycle rather than a 3-year lease cycle. And now that we're a number of years in, we're feeling much more confident about our plan, our process, what we know about breakage rates and and just kind of recycling parts and fixing computers on our own, that we've been able to move towards a plan which is a 4-year lease cycle. In addition to that, like a buyout program at the end, which will ultimately save us some money because any value that's left then in the device we still have and can repurpose for other uses. So we are happy to announce that it's a reduction of a technology plan ask for not only this year, but that's a reduction ongoing into future years. The technology plan is an April early budget vote item. We've had to do that in the years past too. That's in order to ensure we can order the devices, get them here, delivered, asset tagged, and into students' hands by the early fall. So that is the reason that you will see this on the consent agenda process for April. Do you want me to keep going? Yep. So moving on to the strategic equity, I'm going to do my best to get through this fast. I know the board has a lot to talk about. On the strategic equity projects, it is important that we put the strategic framework into the room as we think about these particular projects in line with the board's goals and visions. Goal number 1, that every child is on track to graduate for college, career, and community. Goal number 2, the district and every school, and it is a place where children, staff, and families thrive. Goal number 3, that African American children and youth excel in school. So as we move on to thinking about the strategic equity projects, we are kind of internally checking that we are in line with our goals and that these are the highest priority items that will move these goals forward. So I'm going to hand it over to Lisa to cover the investments in the first 2 slides. Thanks, Kevin.
Yeah, if folks have questions on what, I think TJ had a question too, if you guys have questions on what we've talked about so far. So
Just real quick, the G2 3-year cycle is up in this budget year also, is it not? And what's the plan for are we going to go to a 4-year lease to own on those also?
Correct.
Okay, that was a simple question. And thank you for listening and working on it and making it happen.
Chad and his team did a fantastic job.
Chad, wherever you are, there you are.
You're behind me.
And your team.
Go for it, Nikki.
My question is, I'm hearing from a lot of parents, I can't afford if my kid breaks so-and-so device, does he have to take them home? I heard this from a numerous amount of parents. So my question is there a way for those who are low income, who truly don't have the money, if the kid drops a computer, and having been computer necessary since I was about 6 and I've dropped over 10 of them, I do know that it happens a decent amount. Is there a way to opt out?
Yeah, Nikki, I'll send that information back out to the board. It was been a while since we've updated the board on the take-home device policy. I think it's a good update that's due to the board anyway, so we'll make sure we'll pull that together for you.
Okay, moving on, this slide represents the $1.5 million of targeted investments in strategic equity projects that have actually already been built into the budget book. And I just wanted to remind us all of the investments that have happened already as a result of decisions made by the board. So we've made investments to support our class size policy around the value of small class sizes really at all levels of our school district. The board has supported an investment in world language allocation at the middle school. Last year you did that. That was a very big deal for our middle schools, and as we worked through our allocations and our processes with middle school principals this year, it's a big deal. We really have invested in our students of color getting the access that they deserve and need to world language opportunities. You've also invested in pathways over 2 years, either with the new money or with repurposing that has happened to support our high schools and the work that we're doing to engage students in learning. And then also the board has invested in a process and a plan to intentionally increase participation in advanced placement and advanced coursework through equal opportunity schools. So I just think it's worth mentioning those investments that have already been made even before this year's workbook and allocation process has started. So the items that are on this slide represent investments that, first of all, were made because our BEP survey indicated a need for additional support around mental health needs and student services supports. So we're investing in these areas for a couple different reasons. We're investing so that we can better support the needs of students who have 504 plans or who are highly mobile, our homeless students. Remember that this is the first year that those factors are actually being counted in our allocation process for psychologists and social workers, and that we think was really important. We're investing here so that we can better implement IEP goals who have services aligned to their needs that are specifically delivered by psychologists and social workers. We've invested in these areas so that schools can bring, in some cases, some partial student services FTE to full-time, so they can be full members in schools of student services teams. And we've invested in these areas to implement our weighted student formula in the feeder pattern. And the number one thing that staff told us was invest in us so that we can better serve students with needs versus just seeing students as counts or numbers. We want to be responsive based on need. So that's what we're trying in the pilot area. And we also have some additional FTE to bolster our unallocated pool for wherever needs might arise. So we just discussed last Monday some proposed investments in intensive supports for students.
Are we voting on this? Did we already-
We're not voting.
Just
tonight.
discussion.
No, this is just for input.
Yep.
That's
Right.
what I-
Yep.
What I didn't know.
Yep.
We'll talk about it.
Yeah. So these are investments in intensive supports for students at the elementary, middle school, and high school level. And they represent the capacity that our team thinks that they have for the work and also the capacity and potential for partnerships in our community. So we've invested in, and we talked last week about 4 additional behavioral health in schools programs so that we can stay on track to expand and scale up our programming to support the increasing mental health needs of students. And as a reminder, we are currently at 6 elementary schools and 2 middle schools. And we are proposing to scale up 4 additional behavioral health in schools locations. Our second bullet is 4 additional elementary bounce back programs. So this is an investment at 4 more elementary schools for a total of 12 so that we can provide mental health and trauma informed support earlier and in a more targeted way to our youngest learners. We talked about investing in a new feeder pattern social worker in our pilot area so that we can better connect families with the services and supports that they need. We talked at the high school level about investing in seats for a microschool so that we can meet the needs of a small group of students at the high school who need an alternative setting for a period of time, providing a runway for students to recuperate and transition. And this would be the first of a series of expansions. We want to start here and start well and really study and learn about that. And then finally, we talked about an investment, a behavior education plan training and support so that schools can develop their approach to supporting foundational practices, practices around restorative justice, and also increase the number of seats available for developmental designs, training, and support.
So the one thing I would add real quick is just to ensure the board realizes the micro school expansion, I'll talk about the TID later on in the presentation, but is proposed to be funding through the TID 25 resources for now. So just want to make sure that that's clear, and we'll come back to it in a minute. So in the second theme, which I mentioned earlier regarding supporting staff who directly support some of our students with the greatest needs. One of the programs that we're recommend working through and starting as it relates to our Forward Madison MOA partnership with UW is a new pilot program called Accelerated Licensure in Special Education, or what we're calling ISLE. The goal of this program is to move staff who are in emergency license status in special education to fully certified CC teachers. This is a challenge area that we've talked about with the board in the past, and that this pilot would start with 25 cohort to start this summer, going into the following school year, and if successful and based on need, potentially move to cohort number 2. Directly tied to that would be funding of a .25 director. We have a Forward Madison director right now that's fully funded on grants. As the MMSD grant starts to wind down, we're proposing that that portion of that salary move on to local resources for next year to continue to stabilize that program.
Just a quick question. I read the memo on
quickly
it.
Go through the rest of
all
this.
the grow your own things I'm really happy to see expanding, but there was one piece I didn't understand, which is that it has to be, it's people who are currently employed by MMSD and currently employed as CC teachers on, is it limited to those who have a non-CC license, or because we have some people employed as CC teachers who have no educational certification, period. So I guess my question is it limited to those who already have a general ed license?
I don't think so. Others, yeah, go ahead.
It's Hi everyone. It is for anyone who is hired as a CC teacher on emergency certification, whether they have an educational background or not.
And the program and design will get them initial licensing as well as CC licensing, because it's a different process. There's a whole kind of series of requirements that you have to go through it's easier to get a CC license if you already have a general ed license.
This program is going to take them through their master's program at UW, so when they get out, they'll have that master's, which is also with the CC license.
Okay. Thank you.
And then, do you want to talk about our own kind of strategy and thoughts?
So, just not a ton to share here, but really wanting to sort of explore expanding our partnerships with multiple colleges and universities. We want for the option of our staff to remain open, right? And so our current partnerships are specific to CC licensure specifically, and we certainly want to offer the opportunity for those who do not want to go into a CC certification. Maybe it's bilingual, maybe it's regular ed, so exploring those opportunities as well. So we don't really want to, as much as we support that, we also want to continue to provide options for our staff, and we don't want to inadvertently create a forced choice. So we're exploring those opportunities to provide that, that type of support.
Keep going. All right. And then new promising practices in line with the budget goals. We are really thrilled to ask for the funding tied to the Early College STEM Academy. The first cohort of 25 students is at Madison College right now and thriving. And we look forward to enrolling the next 100 students for the upcoming school year. Happening right now. That's right. As a reminder, the goal of this program is to really provide access and opportunity for our students of color and our women who often don't have as much access to STEM opportunities and STEM employment following college. This also gives those kind of one leg up in the secondary education opportunities. So we're really excited about that. We have $200,000 in the local ask, and we do continue to have a $225,000 goal for fundraising. We have some promising leads, and we hope by June we'll be able to have some good news to share with you. And so this is our pulling it all together slide for you. In total, that's $2.6 million focused on our students with greatest need of general fund investments. Two line items in particular to point out here. You'll see that we did repurpose additional funds from central office to allow for that $300,000, which might be, allocated to some of the conversations from the March instruction work group. And Lisa can talk more about that in just a minute. And we do know that the board has not yet had an opportunity to talk about the ALEC recommendations. We're kind of teeing both those items up for the April operation work group.
Yeah, and just to add a little bit of context, we wanted to certainly recognize and also signal that we owe you some more information on some of these things that we just talked about a week ago when we were here together. So we want to come back in April and tie up some loose ends and talk a little bit more about some additional supports around mental health support and special education that we heard from the board last Monday, particularly around expanding the implementation of CBITS and moving it into the high schools so that we can expand our universal screening and more immediately access needs for students around mental health supports. We talked a little bit about expanding LEAP, NEON, or any of the primary or middle level STEPS programs based on needs of students so that we're better able to transition students and be efficient with time and placing students in a timely manner. And then we also talked a little bit about supporting the Special Ed Student Transitions Project a little bit more. Generally, we We've piloted it last year. We were going to put it forth in the pilot area, in just the memorial area for next year. But this investment would allow us to do that for every school in the district, so that special ed teams and student services teams are prepared on the first day of schools. They know IEPs, they know the students that they're serving, they know what those IEPs say, they have schedules ready, they are ready to go on day one. So we'll talk a little bit about that in April as well. So we'll detail those 3 areas that we heard from you on Monday. And then the other piece that I just wanted to talk a little bit about was the ALAC group, the Advanced Learning Advisory Committee, submitted a list of recommendations that Chris talked about a little bit early during public comment. They discussed those in the middle of January, and our team will be talking about those and bringing back a recommendation. So we wanted to be sure that that placeholder was there so that we can expand high-quality programming for advanced learners and provide high-quality programming for more youth of color in our district.
All right, why don't we pause here actually and kind of we can discuss what the recommendations are and then finish up after that. You want to start?
Just have a quick question about the other advanced learning. So are you saying that from the speaker, I thought that was determined and that was a recommendation submitted to OCR? So did I hear that wrong? And if it's submitted, wouldn't we know what the budget impact is? I mean, basically it would be a
Sure,
doubling
I'll
of
start.
what we currently
So
spend.
James, you are right. Their recommendations were submitted, and we share those recommendations with OCR. And then we, as a district team, have an obligation to respond to those recommendations from the ALAC parent group. So you received a couple of weeks ago what those recommendations were. You will then, we'll discuss with you in April what, how we want to respond to those. And it was, the recommendations were made both in areas of staffing, FTE, and also in areas of curriculum development, program development. So we want to be able to review those. We owe you some conversation about that. We have to respond to those as a district and then come back with our recommendations.
Okay, well, I guess my question is, if we submitted them to OCR,
I think
then aren't they?
we didn't submit. No, we didn't submit them as things that we were obligated to do.
Okay, that's my
But
question.
the OCR obligation was that there was a committee that would produce recommendations. So the submission is more about proving that we followed through on convening and hearing from people and coming up with a set of recommendations. That was our commitment to OCR. Now we have to decide, what are we going to do with these recommendations? What do we like about them? Which do
Okay,
we
so then
disagree
it's just
with?
basically
Yeah.
still just recommendations.
The
from
recommendations, yeah. So
Okay.
we have to talk about them and tell you what we think about them.
Nikki?
I know I kind of asked this question, but I'm still kind of confused on the
Yep.
intensive support. Now, that's still something that's being discussed, or that's something that's already been built in?
No.
Intensive support services?
Yeah, so the stuff that is on that first slide that is related to what gets built into school workbooks, this page, that was just reminding you guys that the workbooks already went out. We built the psychologists, social workers, and CC teachers into the school's workbooks. It's very hard to pull those back at this point.
No, it's the next slide.
I'm just creating context for you, Nikki. So the next slide and everything after that, those are just proposals at this point. I know Lisa kept talking about investments or proposed possible investments, right? So
That's where
we've
I-
got between now and June to determine whether or not we're gonna for sure make these investments or massage them or, yeah, I mean, we're still in the very early stages. It's only March. We got all the way to June to shape things. But this is what's on the table right now.
Cool.
Yep.
That's where I was lost.
Yeah, it's a really good question.
All right, maybe I'll jump in. Maybe to go back to, I have 3 kind of points. To go back to start with the advanced learning piece, can you guys just play out for us, let's assume we don't, as a district, land so far off from what the advisory group recommended. What would that mean for the budget?
Yeah, it'd be a pretty significant gap. So at this point, based on, the conversations in this budget, the budget is balanced as of right now, knowing we have, a couple open items waiting for the state to make some decisions on. Funding the full ALEC recommendations would leave us a gap in our budget that we would have to fund through
can you just kind of, can you just give round numbers?
It's $1 million.
I think it's over $1 million.
Yeah.
So 22 FTE times average salary
Of 87,000.
1.8 million.
It's a very significant.
Okay.
It's a very significant dollar amount, which is why we need to be very thoughtful and intentful. Why we want to have an actual conversation versus just one slide.
And can you just play out what's the work between now and then to come up with your kind of perspective on where we're going to land there?
So I've been working with Ethan and Leanne to look at the recommendations and to think about what, given our current context, our current staffing model, and the other work that we're doing, what might be a response to each of those root cause areas that ALAC recommended. And we would bring a proposal back to you in April with our best thinking about what that would be, that we could have a conversation, see if there's any additional input or something else that we were missing, and then we would go back to the table and tie it up and put it in our April budget.
Yeah, and I would add just a couple of other thoughts, Kate. One is, our team beyond just the three people that Lisa
For sure.
described would like a chance to think about it. I mean, I think Chris mentioned this in her public comments, but if we were to make even a portion of that investment as kind of a first big step, we just want to make sure that it is going to result in expanding and deepening advanced learning experiences for not just all advanced learners, but specifically for students of color, which is so central to that particular piece of work. So we just want to, I think it can't be, and I don't think this is the intent of the Advanced Learner Committee, but it can't simply be an expansion of what we're currently doing. I think it would require kind of revisiting what those positions do, what they are. I think, I think there's a little more thinking to do as it relates to what that
hear you, and I agree,
performs.
and I agree with you. That makes me think, though, that we're talking about a longer process than something that would impact next year.
Well, that leads me to my second point, Kate, which is just that a lot of the things that we're proposing now are about bringing things to scale over time. So we're also talking about what would a first significant step look like for understanding what those roles can and should be before expanding district-wide.
So I'll move off the advanced learning one, maybe just to preview at least some of what I'm going to be asking about then in April. I mean, for me, this is a little less about the kind of committee that made these recommendations and more about our statutory obligation to provide an advanced learning programs, right? Not kind of ad hoc experiences to students who have advanced learning needs in 5 domain areas. And so the question that I'm going to be looking at, I guess, when we come back in April is, does a child who's an advanced learner in leadership or in arts have access to a program K through 12 in Madison that challenges them every year? And I'd be curious, I guess, Lisa, what's your take right now on the answer to that?
So, I think that we are in compliance with state statute. We went through that with the state multiple years ago. We have an advanced learning plan. Are there always places that we can improve? Absolutely. I think that, this is the statement that I say all of the time. I think we have to get better at good, solid, rigorous core instruction first and foremost, but I also do acknowledge that there are places in our schools and the work that we're doing where the advanced programming does need to be strengthened. I think it is varied at different schools given their local context, but I do think, I don't think it's perfect everywhere, but I do think that we are making progress in that area. And I'm actually thankful to the ELAC recommendations for actually highlighting the ways in which they think that we can make a difference and we can strengthen it. So I'm looking forward to coming back and having that conversation in each of the areas.
Okay.
Could I piggyback quickly?
Yep, go for it.
A statute question, because I haven't read it in a while. But does the statute get specific?
I've got it up.
But is it a general statute about?
What do you want to know about it? I've got it.
Well, if my memory serves me correctly, and it may not, I thought it just referenced providing a program, and it doesn't.
It does.
Really
So it says programs for gifted and talented pupils. In this section, gifted and talented pupils means pupils enrolled in public schools who give evidence of high performance capability in intellectual, creative, artistic, leadership, or specific academic areas, and who need services or activities not ordinarily provided in a regular school program in order to fully develop such capabilities. And then it says school boards have to offer blah, blah, blah. That's the part you know because it's telling us what we're supposed to do. So it is specific to different domain areas, if that was your question. Do you want to?
No, I'm good, thank you.
Any other comments on advanced learning, and then I'll go to my others.
I will.
Yeah, go for it, Gloria.
You know, I'm with
might
Kate.
also.
I think that
And TJ wanted to.
you know, what I will be looking for in April is really our focused on advanced learning, and what Jen said is on Black excellence, right? How are we strategically, intentionally focusing on Black excellence, right, in advanced learning, and you know, starting that from the K through 12. So I'll be looking at that, and then I'm just wondering also, did ALEC, is it, provide recommendations of how to increase the budget over the years, right? So that it's just not the 22 positions, right? I mean, how do we, or is that something you're going to be looking at?
Yeah, so there were recommendations in multiple areas. One was around FTE and staffing, the 22. Right. And then there were other recommendations related to curriculum development or program development or recruitment or talent development. So there were robust recommendations in multiple areas, and we want to be sure that we have a discussion about each of those pieces with, like Jen said, with a wider group of people so that we can get some feedback and figure out exactly what the most high leverage strategies would be.
Okay.
Yep. Imad, did you have?
Not specifically on advanced learning. Should I wait?
You can go for it. I'll come back at the end then.
I had a question on slide 12. It's the first slide on the proposed strategic equity investments. So the 724 is for 1920, right? The 724,000. Yeah, sorry, that one right there.
Correct, that's the 1920, and then the projects are designed to scale up for the 2021 budget to the 748. So that was part of the conversation and instruction work group where we had more detailed slides.
Okay, yeah, I was just wondering. So the 748 is an extension of the same programs that are for next year? Okay.
Correct, it's expansion of.
Oh, okay. And then just to follow up, does that account for if the feeder pattern pilot is successful, does that include additional social workers?
Yeah.
Yes, it does.
Yeah, the idea would be there would be one social worker in each feeder pattern the following pending the pilot.
All right, maybe I'll jump into my
TJ
other
had
last comment. All right. The other main one I think that I was going to bring up is just the budget right now is balanced on a 0.5% base wage increase in addition to steps and lanes. And I wanted to re-raise it for this group so that, first of all, the whole board was clear, given that I have heard previously from numerous board members, including myself, that may be not where we land, and we don't want to land in a situation like we did last year where we're kind of trying to make adjustments at the end. So I just wanted to raise it more for discussion here. Personally, I would like to see us push towards a higher base wage. I don't think we'll get all the way to CPI, but I do think I would like to see what it looks like. And so I wanted to raise that, and maybe I'll pause there again just in case there's other board members to weigh in. So, TJ.
Yeah, kind of picking up on that, and I'm a little confused on process and priorities and what's been done here. We have the special education and /BEP things listed here as confirmed and complete, yet the board has not made a vote. And Lisa listed a whole things from previous years talking about decisions the board has made, and as I've said multiple times, the board makes a decision when the board votes. This is built in at a budget that multiple board members have expressed that the 0.5 is not how we want to balance the budget. So that has to be rebalanced eventually. And I think that if the board had voted and said, put this in there, I'd be fine with it. I have misgivings about all three pieces of it. And I don't think we have enough information to know. We don't know. I mean, I don't know where these psychologists are going. And I don't know what kind of psychological allocation is already existing at the school it's going to. And, you know, as a general rule, I support more psychologists and social workers. But these are going very specific places. And I have no idea where they are. And so it's very disturbing to me that these are in here. We don't have a basic level of staffing for how many administrators, how many central office administrators, how many NUPs. We have a change in the number of classroom teachers that's being reallocated towards some of the special education and BEP things. We don't know where those teachers are coming from. We don't know what grade levels. You might know. Nobody else knows. The lack of information that this has been here. So I guess that, you know, that having stated that, and again, emphasizing that the 0.5 is, with the exception of the educational assistance unit where I can have no opinion, the 0.5 is far from sufficient for a base wage increase. Having said all that, what is the process for all the things listed here as not needing early approval? When would the, I mean, we can pull the other stuff out of the budget book, but when are these approvals anticipated?
June. So following the standard process, the only two items going forward for early approval requests are the tech plan and the ALEC 121, and that's because we need to start recruiting our teachers to get ready for kind of this coming summer programming. Those are the only two early budget approvals. So anytime between now and June. If there was something in these particular projects that the board did not want to fund, that would be something that we would, you know, bring up today. We would bring up in the April wrap up in the April operating work group, and if the board didn't want it, we would pull it out of the budget book before we even wrote it in April, or it stays in the budget book until June, and as part of the board amendment process in May, it could get pulled and refunded, repurposed towards another higher priority of the board in the May process as well. So it's the standard process from that perspective. We're also following our standard process for the workbook allocation, which has been that we release the workbooks based on the allocation that is available using our standard allocation formula. So to answer your question, TJ, about like class size and where it came from, the answer is we ran the formula based on current enrollment projections. And what happens is literally in, you know, a system, a number of FTE fall out. The system formula says we no longer need this because enrollment's done. And instead of just reducing staff by that total amount, staffing was reallocated. So where it came from is entirely tied to where enrollment is down.
I understand that, but the results of it is what I, and sometimes formulas do things that make sense, and sometimes they do things that raise questions. And without seeing the results of the formulas and understanding how they interact with the new investments, it's really difficult to assess where we are in terms of the budget, and in terms of and also in terms of priorities. Related to this, I guess that the last thing is that I'll ask for is that I appreciate the savings that have been achieved through reallocations and things, but I think that given the level of new investments or reallocation investments that are on the table, and if you add the AL, that's that's close to $2 million, depending on what the high school piece of that looks like. The distance between the 0.5 and the CPI, I think that the board really needs some options, and maybe options that you consider drastic and would not recommend, but still options for places where funding can be reallocated from, funding and positions. Because without choices, we don't have decisions to make.
Yeah, I might just
And I'm going to leave it at that.
No, maybe I'll just jump in and kind of second that, because I mean, we were just having a discussion in the ad hoc around the BEP prior to this, and some of the options, actually you brought up an option around a team, right? Like if we're saying what our priorities right now are, mental health, supports for opportunity youth, as we eloquently heard earlier, advanced learners, then we also need to take a hard look at some of the programs that maybe are past their age and stage. So I would certainly appreciate some options as well. Again, and if they're not recommended, then tell us that, right? Tell us that this isn't what we would recommend.
And I'm just going to quickly, one of the requests is for a list of unfilled positions at all levels, from the school level down. My understanding is that we have unfilled EA positions all the way up to unfilled assistant director positions. Or maybe not that, the last one. Maybe we don't have that this year. That things have been allocated to schools and not filled.
Great, Nikki.
Just quick.
So, I mean, that's a request.
My quick request would be to discuss in April about the bounce back, the pilot program, whether we need to do that earlier because of our staff, because whether or not we're able to provide that with the allocations. I think that would be helpful to know earlier rather than later, because those are we've already seen that bilingual and special ed are the two hardest positions to fill. So sometimes I think we need to do that sooner rather than later.
So
I
Nikki,
would formally request to possibly discuss it next month if possible.
as an early approval,
Yeah.
is that what you're, okay. Just want to make sure I understood that. Makes sense.
Do you want
to go to repurposing, since you guys are talking about that?
Any other comments on the investment areas or assumptions to date? Okay.
All right, so similar to previous years, but actually at a much deeper level, our team has, over the last 45 days, done a very intensive process with every single department in central office. And as part of that process, what we looked at was literally every single account line in each department. I can tell you it's 177 pages of account lines and account budgets, all of which were touched and looked at. They were reviewed with 3-year trends. So the conversations were, what did we spend over the last 3 years on this line item? Is it still in line with the priorities of the district? If it's not, is there a higher, better use that we could repurpose it for? Is it something that we should be moving to repurpose to the conversations and the items that we've all just had? Or is it an item that's underinvested in that we should really be thinking about investing more in, or other creative ways to be working towards solving some of the district's challenges? Through those conversations is how we have validated all the priority projects kind of the past, revisiting where we are, where we've been, where we're going. And those that are kind of at where they're at, and maybe we budgeted a little higher than we needed in the past, or maybe something just didn't come to fruition as we expected. We've identified the $1 million that's on the slide in front of you. So that's inclusive. These are object codes. It's just the easier way to look at it across the full budget. This is the level at which the budget book itself is produced at. The purchased services or personnel services, these are often thought of as contracts. So the $100,000 in tech plan savings is built in here, as is kind of streamlining consultant budget line items, along with other vendor contracts that we go out for bid to push for savings, our copier contract being the best example right now, and just other systems negotiations that we do throughout the year. Number 2 on there, Central office, particularly through Lisa's team, has committed to reducing the number of teacher substitutes that we pull out of the classroom. We call these administrative subs. This is when we pull a teacher during a school day for various needs, often very important needs, but we are continuing to work and finding other ways because we know the teacher being in the classroom in front of the kids is the highest priority. Summer school budget, the board saw in June. So the summer school budget did go down by about $60,000. So that's savings that is included in here. And the rest is extended employment lines that we were able to just kind of skinny up to what we actually needed. Revenue estimates are looking strong in a few areas. Particularly, we get rebates back from some of our supply contracts that are built in, and some really good work between the schools and the procurement team to use our procurement processes has identified some strong revenue rebates that is a benefit for us. And then just supply lines and a bunch of other miscellaneous lines that we've been able to really hone in and focus to identify the $1 million of repurposing. And so getting to TJ's kind of somewhat earlier point, you know, we get the question kind of why can't we just cut more? Why can't we just purpose more? And this really, the answer to this is really in the multi-year strategy. Over the last 5 years, central office has cut and has repurposed over $17 million, much of which is in schools of that today. So when you start to look at just central office to try to fund the large projects, the pie keeps getting smaller. Year after year, it's getting smaller. So when you're looking at kind of the non-personnel side of the house in particular, 81% is personnel. Of the rest of the 13% is the non-personnel items that we often think about. And Kate, they're the programs kind of you were just asking about. Some of the challenge is all of what we're thinking about exists in that red tiny square, which is a tiny square of the larger bucket. Because we don't have a lot of direct control. We do have some indirect control, I understand that, of a lot of these items. As it relates to our 2X charters and the voucher program, that piece of the pie is getting bigger on us, so it's crunching out other items in the budget. Our transportation services right now is on hold for the, meaning what we have is on hold to implement the middle school start time project. A year or two down the road, we'll be further into that, and there's potential savings in that bucket, just not for this coming year. Our 4K providers, and it's tied to contracts, that's in there. Utilities, Dean has mentioned in the past and will continue to mention that there's probably some work we can be doing about renewable energy sources to try to bring down our utilities bills. I would agree with that. It's just not something we can capture kind of for next year funding. And then the blue is our building maintenance. All of what you heard from entering into this meeting is probably because that piece of the pie is already a little too small. It is not the area we're likely to go to for cuts. So it all kind of comes out of that red pie. And it's, you know, we will continue to repurpose. It's just getting harder and harder when it comes to supporting our overall district priorities.
Nikki, do you have a question?
Yeah, just a quick question. I know we're talking about cutting, but I just have one quick question. I've heard a lot from the long-term subs. How much would it cost to pay them for those snow days? Can we get a calculation, please?
We'll follow up with you on that, Nikki.
Beautiful.
You
Thank
got
you.
it.
All right.
Yeah.
Kind of backing up to the previous slide, and I appreciate the difficulty of making recommendations for savings. I mean, it's there's nothing anyone. I mean, we all want to be doing more than we're doing and not less, and we want to be doing it with more. Question, kind of having said that, and kind of an unrelated question, which is, how did the second quarter actuals versus budgeted look in your estimation? I mean, where are we in that? I mean, I always look at them, and I'm never quite sure how to interpret them. So,
yeah.
And I kind of do it by myself, and I don't think I've ever asked anyone, like, what do you think? So I'm asking.
Well, feel free to ask me.
I just did.
And more details when I have all the numbers in front of me, which I don't right now.
Later this week, so maybe we'll do it then.
So I'm happy to, yeah, feel free to call me. We can talk about that. It's trending very similar to last year. Okay. What that means is we do see salary savings at the beginning of the year, largely because, you know, it takes time to hire staff, and if you have a vacancy and you hire them later, you get a little bit of savings in there. That's part of the process, very typical, particularly for this time of year. The other item that's similar to last year, kind of, would stand out if you're looking at our quarterly financials, is the fact that we put aside the money for the safety and security. It's a large, investment for this year, and it's taken a bit of time for the RFPs, to go out. You'll see that when you see the consent memos for this month.
Is the budgeted but unspent facilities pieces?
Yeah,
Okay.
and so that's just gearing up now. You'll see that in the consent this month and next month. So that's just lagging behind spending, and it was new, so that would stick out if you look at the quarterly financials.
Do we think some of that might kick over to the 2019-2020 budget?
I do.
Yeah.
Yep.
Thanks.
Okay, so this visual you've seen before, just to update the talking points on which I've already shared, and that is that in 1920, at this moment in time, the budget is balanced, knowing there's open items for us to talk about in April. So the last piece of the budget, just to make sure we've kind of aired everything before we move into April, is to update the board on where we are with TID funding. Our TID 25 is the $9 million, kind of in the loan, based on that TID conversation with the city. We've been drawing down $2 million a year. This will be the last of that larger drawdowns. We're coming to a close. Our proposed process with that funding is to stick with the investment categories that are in the TID schedule for next year, with two, just somewhat shifting a little bit of funding. One, primarily because interest rates have increased on us, and this is a loan. And so we had to rebalance our interest rates within the $9 million of funding. So about $200,000 had to go down into the interest rate expense and kind of remove from some of the other priority projects. And we're recommending that what was previously the innovation opportunities line entirely be repurposed to micro schools for the remainder of the TID funding, allowing for the funding to be available for the next 2 years for that strategy. This year, TID 27, 32, and 43 all closed, which has generated $4.5 million of funding for this particular year. Our current recommendation is that we just reserve those funds to for our upcoming conversations around possible alternative facility strategy or some other long-range facility strategy at the board's recommendation, so we can get a jump start on potentially a handful of projects before we go to referendum. In just a minute. Yeah. So just to wrap this up on next steps, Operation Work Group, we've already talked about quite a bit, some open items to come back to you with. Draft preliminary budget release in the April regular board meeting. May, June is for board deliberations discussion with a regular board meeting, board vote at the end of June.
Yeah, the back up to the TIDs that closed.
Yeah.
I don't recall if we discussed letting them ride another year to accrue the housing benefit. Did we do that?
So it's whether the city did that, and I don't know off the top of my head. I can't remember.
They did it on
They
all three,
normally
and
do.
that's
I don't
a city
recall us
decision.
ever-
We have zero say in it, but the city did it for all three of these TIDs, and it's general policy for the city to do it. And I can add that from discussions with both Fitchburg, Shorewood, and Maple Bluff, whose TID boards I all attend, all the municipalities that we share TIDs with will be keeping TIDs open for affordable housing collections for one more year. That is general policy for all the municipalities we're dealing with.
Thanks.
And it's a good one.
Kate, can I chime in before we shift to benefits? Because I think we likely won't be coming back to this discussion on priority investments. I just want to remind the board that we are still early in this process. We've got the next 6 weeks or so to pull our budget book together. And if you do have further thoughts on priority investments that you would like to see show up in that budget book, don't sit on them until the April Operations Work Group meeting. Please share with us your thoughts in advance of that discussion. Obviously, we'll talk about it again there.
Speak for myself, but I think I speak probably, we'll let them echo in, but I think that a lot of us share Nikki's would like to see the behavioral health in schools and bounce back built in from the beginning, and so that's not an addition. And then since we're transitioning here, to the next thing, which is health insurance and health care, I will be recusing myself from this discussion and leaving the table.
Before we transition, there was just a variety of discussions in this, so can you guys summarize what the open items are for bringing back to the April operations work group? I have a list, and I just want to make sure I didn't lose anything.
So it's to continue the conversation that the board started in the March instruction work group around potential additional funding for mental health and or special education. And as it relates to that, potentially the $300,000 that we have kind of reserved to help fund that program. So pulling that together.
As well as the Advanced Learner Advisory Committee recommendations and our take on that and what the investment could potentially be. And I would say, we'll be scrubbing everything this one more time, gearing up for that meeting and checking that they're in alignment with our district goals. So I don't know, there could be something else that we propose by the time we get there.
I have a couple of others. So the one around just if there are options of areas that we could, even if, again, it's not, in your opinion, the best course of action, but an option for us to create some funds that we could reallocate into some of those other areas. And then a scenario around what something more than a 0.5% base wage would look like. So, and those might be intertwined, but just to help the board see what that looks like.
Agreed, and I think that's actually going to be part of this discussion as well, because there may be some opportunity within compensation to shift funding around.
Totally. Shall we try that? Let's do it. All right, switch gears. Nothing else before healthcare? All right, thanks, guys.
All right, so our strategy really is to attract and retain our best employees, which means we will invest in people. And we talked about investing before earlier, and I want to switch the way on how we're talking about investing here. And that's really looking at benefits and compensation as that total benefits package and investing in that as well. We know there's a really strong balance between a rich benefit plan and a total compensation plan and something that's sustainable. So we work really hard towards that. This year we worked with MTI, with our insurance carriers, to really come up with a solid renewal, and we want to thank both of them for that and the hard work that they've done to get us to this point. I want to ground ourselves in a little bit of the history of health insurance, though, and we're going to go back 5 years. In 14-15, we had a 5% increase in our renewal, but with that, we added a $20 office visit copay to help control those costs. In 15-16, you'll notice that we had a 0 renewal. Our plans were running really good. We had some good negotiations with our insurance carriers, which just got us at a really good spot. 16-17 came in, and we had to make some changes, so we implemented a tiered employee premium contribution ranging from 1.25% to 10% depending on the employee type. It averages right around 3.5%. If you remember, 2 years ago, we had the big change, and that was going from 3 insurance carriers down to 2. And a lot of the savings was reinvested into compensation. We increased beginning teacher salaries, we increased base wage, and we also invested in summer school salaries. And then this last year for 18-19, we wanted to stay silent. There were quite a few years of changes, and that big change in 17-18, we just wanted to stabilize everything. This year we came in, we budgeted for a $2.5 million increase, and we have a path to get us to that and even some future savings. But I want to ground ourselves. After all of those changes, we've really gotten to a really good place for our insurance plan. And I want to focus kind of in the non-grayed out section. Our employees pay on average 3.5% for premiums. And if we compare ourselves to our comparables, we're doing pretty good. It's closer to 12%. We do not have a deductible. Every other place around us has a deductible. We have a $20 copay for adults and nothing for our kiddos. Urgent care is in line. We have an emergency room visit that is less than everyone else around us, and we have prescription drug copays, which are kind of in line. But what really stands out for us is that even based on having a strong, rich benefit plan, our premiums are the least across everywhere else. And that really kind of comes to play and shows all of the hard work we've done over the past 5 years with the insurance carriers and even with our employees. We've got a healthy population. Now let's talk a little bit about what our enrollment looks like, and I want to just provide a high-level overview of our demographics. 73% of our employees have GHC. 72% of our employees have family coverage. We also have around 400 employees enrolled in our point of service plan, and that equates to about 10% of our active employee population. The other thing I just want you all to realize is that we do cover our retirees on our health insurance plan until they turn 65. It's about 12% of our population. Now let's look at the utilization. When I talk about utilization, that's really how our renewal comes into play. The insurance carriers look at our utilization to determine our premiums. That's where the negotiations start. And I'm going to try to put it in simplest terms. With Dean and GHC, they look at for the premiums that we collected, some of it has to be paid out in claims and some of it has to be paid out in admin fees, right? And Dean and GHC like to run right around 90%. So for every dollar that they collect in premiums, 90 cents should be paid out in claims, and the other 10 cents should be paid out in admin fees. But if we look at our book of business, or how we're running, that's that fancy little speedometer chart, we're not running as good as what we should be. We want to be in that green section. That's our goal, right around 90%. With GHC, we're running at 97%. So every dollar they collect, 97 cents goes out to claims. And with Dean, it's even worse. For every dollar, they're actually paying $1.02 out in claims. So with that, that really limits what we're able to negotiate for our carriers to get us down to a zero, right? And that's where we're going to talk about some changes and our path to get us to our budget increase. But before we do that, I also want to talk about one other piece of the puzzle, and that's our point of service plan. The point of service plan is a plan that's available to all of our employees, and it gives them freedom of choice. What we see is that these people on the point of service plan can use the in-network doctors, GHC and UW, Dean and St. Mary's, or they have the flexibility to go elsewhere. And a perfect example of that would be someone might be on the point of service plan because they have a child in college who may be going to college in sunny Florida, right? And that kid wants to have a primary care doctor in Florida instead of having coming back to Madison for their healthcare needs. So that's where the point of service plan kind of comes into play. When we had our 3 health insurance carriers, the way that the point of service plan was set up was that employees had to buy into the point of service plan. So they paid the difference between the HMO and the point of service plan. For example, an employee who wanted the point of service unity plan had to pay $540 more per paycheck to be able to enroll in that point of service plan. But we realized in that transition from 3 carriers to 2, that something that significant would probably make that transition very difficult. So we worked with the insurance carriers to come up with a transition plan, and they agreed for a few years to subsidize those point of service rates to make it easier for employees to transition from that Unity plan to Dean or GHC. What we've seen though is that because those subsidized rates are so small, many employees are now electing the point of service plan just because the rate difference is smaller. I was out in a building a few weeks ago talking to some employees about the HMO and the point of service plan, and a person came up to me afterwards and said, "Thank you so much for explaining the difference. I was a new hire, I was looking at my benefits, and for $10 more a month, I could elect the point of service plan. I'm healthy, my kids are healthy, we've always had GHC, I love my GHC doctor. But for $10 a month, that knowledge of flexibility was something I wanted to take advantage of." So this employee enrolled in the point of service plan, knowing they most likely will never use it. His $10 a month, or $120 a year, was $9,600 for the school district to absorb in premiums. $9,600. So this is a place where we need to start looking back at that 2-year agreement and start incrementally moving back towards a larger premium differential so that employees are making the best decision on what healthcare they should be enrolling in. Which grounds us back in our plan designs. And we talked a little bit at the beginning about what our plan looks like, but we know that we need and have a path to get to that $2.5 million increase. And we stopped and we looked. What are some things that we should focus on? There's a lot of things we can do with healthcare, but what are some of the things that are key takeaways for us? One piece is the employee premium contribution. On average, our employees pay 3.5%. A deductible is another spot. Our employees do not have deductibles. And ER visits is another way to help make educated decisions on where you should go for care. And that's where we focused on just coming up with the pieces of the puzzle to get us to our renewal. In January, we worked with the insurance carriers and MTI to come in with our initial renewal. Our initial increase came in at $4.516 million, and our budget allocation is $2.5 million. Between January and now, we've been working with the insurance carriers to come up with those options that may make the most sense. Those options include increasing the emergency room copay, changing the point of service employee premium contribution, adding the deductible, and potentially increasing or addressing the employee premium contribution across the board. And if we look at all of those things together, that could be savings in excess of $5.7 million. We only need to get to $2.5 million. So what we all have looked at, what we're recommending and what we support to get us to our budget allocation is increasing the emergency room copay from $50 to $150. What that does is it helps drive care to urgent care, helps drive care to office visits. But if an employee or a family member goes to the emergency room and they're admitted into the hospital, they're truly seeking emergency care, that copay is waived. We also want to adjust the point of service piece of the puzzle, and that would be changing the employee premium contribution. It would change it from 1 times the EPC to 2 times the EPC, which in essence for a food service employee or an SEA would change the premium from $30 a month to $60 a month. And then we also want to leave on the table some other options if the board wishes to repurpose into other pieces. One would be adding the deductible. That's an additional savings of $2.5 million. And or changing the employee premium contribution across the board. And that we would leave up to you for discussion. And with that, I'm going to open it up for questions.
Any questions? Nikki.
Not a question, it's more of a statement. Gotten multiple emails for the past year from our teachers saying they can't, they're choosing not to go to a doctor because the ER visits are so long and the amount of time. How do we, ask it as a question, how do we manage to work that out? I understand ERs are busy, I understand raising the copay, but our teachers are saying they can't get in.
You said they couldn't go see the doctors, but then you said ER. That's
I meant
two
ER
different.
doctor, I apologize.
It's
I
the
said
emergency
that.
room visits. Thanks, I didn't quite get it.
Yeah.
That's all I
And
meant.
my question is, if we switch this and we're encouraging some ER visits and that, which happen, and I don't want to say they don't, how do we make sure it works with our teachers' schedules? How do we make sure that they're still able to access that care?
Urgent care is the place to go.
Got it.
Urgent care is available 7 days a week. It's not 24/7, but it's usually 7 in the morning till 9 o'clock at night. And that is immediate care. You walk in and you are seen on the spot. And that has the same copay as an office visit. So there's no difference with an office visit or urgent care.
I appreciate that because I'm getting that a lot and I didn't know how to answer it.
You can't schedule ER. They just, you got to go when you think you need to. And urgent care is depending on what plan you got and what their open times are. You gotta work that, you know, excuse me.
No.
I'm done.
Maybe just to piggyback on the ER one, how do you have a sense of who is going to the ER or how frequently our employees are? Is like how many people, I guess, are going to get touched by that change?
We've actually asked the insurance carriers to give us some statistics on what it looks like, and they are saying a lot of the claims that are going to the emergency room actually are preventable and should be going to urgent care or to their office visits. They're not able to give us exact numbers, but what we can see is increasing that ER copay to $150. Actually, part of the savings and a majority of the savings is driving people away from the emergency room back into urgent care and office visits.
Okay, so we don't know how many people that impacts.
Could you tell me more about how you explained the POS opportunity to people, and then in thinking more on what Nikki was talking about is through our wellness program, are we able to get information out to people about access to urgent care and the need to, what's the difference between that and running to the emergency rooms? So the POS information, how did you get that to people? And is it being promoted? How is it being promoted so people will get the nuance of it? Because it doesn't sound like a simple thing to understand.
Yeah. We have an employee guide when people are hired or employees are hired that have that high-level overview. We also have an online system that has that information, and we meet with new hires individually if they would like to understand the differences between the insurance plans. But a lot of employees do not take those opportunities. So that's where we need to do a better job getting out to the schools and meeting with them. If we go down the path of changing that employee premium contribution, it's a big deal. And I want to say it's going to be as big of a deal for us as it was changing the insurance carriers. So we're going to kind of roll out the red carpet and make sure we're communicating with every employee that has the point of service plan right now, sitting down with them, explaining the differences, showing them the cost benefit, and really helping them through the process of determining if it should be that plan for them or if it's something else.
I got follow-up.
I
got follow-up.
Wait for him to I didn't hear you, Dean. I apologize.
Right. Yeah, I understand that, and it MTI has been a negotiating partner in this process all along. So I think there's an opportunity by working with them to continue partnering in negotiation all year round with their membership to help get this information to them and explain it more, because the little bit you just explained to me right now, I got no clue what it means or how it works. And then since healthcare is such a mess in this country anyway, no one wants to mess with their plan. So when you do something like this, it's like, no, automatically you're going to say, hold on, because of the health care in this country anyway. So I think if you want to pursue this as an opportunity, you have to be a lot more creative and sensitive and informing people numerous times on ways that why it's a benefit to them and how it would help. And then if at some point it doesn't work anymore, you flip back in this avenue for you to get back to the original thing. So that seems to be a harmless way of assisting here. And so when we talk about employee contributions, we could just maybe remove that one if we see much more people thinking about other ways of the POS. Perhaps there's two there, and emergency room copay that's a significant jump from 50 to, and I noticed on the others no other one pays more than 100, so we're going to jump up over them, leapfrog them too. Now I can see where that most people don't go to the emergency room unless it's something that hopefully it doesn't happen to anyone. They got to end up in an emergency room unless they get you know, put right into the hospital, then that gets waived. But, so the option here is POS, so I think we should really figure out ways to get this information more out to people in ways that they can understand it, and perhaps more people hit that number, whatever you think it is, to whatever it is that would take it, and maybe more. I don't know.
Yeah, so Dean, I would say, much like we did with when we switched from 3 carriers to 2, our communication and rollout plan would be very similar. So for those folks that are being affected by that change, we would be doing all of those types of communication, which included, you know, info sessions, one-on-one sessions, like a video module, we call it a brain shark, where people can go in online and learn at their leisure, right? So we would employ all of those opportunities to educate staff that would be affected by that.
Yeah, I think that's an avenue that we should do more of, trying to promotion-wise than just lay it out there and say, well, you didn't take it, and so now you got to pay more on the other end. So that's my idea.
My comment is this. There are going to be some individuals who don't choose POS because they want to, but because it's the only one who will take a child with certain medical conditions, or they have a very unique condition, medical condition. I hate using myself, but I'm going to do it again. I've spent 3.5 months trying to meet with the neurologist because I'm on Medicare, and been told that I don't qualify because of that, so I have to go through 3 triage options. How do we make sure that our people who truly need the POS are not discouraged from using it? Because that I'm really worried about.
That was our concern when we switched from the 3 carriers to 2. If you recall, people with the Unity point of service plan were paying $540 a month for that coverage. We're not ready to get back to that. And I think incrementally, if we just change that employee premium contribution, that will still be financially sustainable for those that need the point of service plan and choose the point of service plan, but also helps drive others to make the decision to stay on that HMO plan as well.
I just wanted to make sure that they are covered, because knowing what a nightmare it was for me trying to do it, which without threatening legal 3 different times. And I am educated. We're dealing with teachers who may have very little amount of time. I have the time to do it. I just don't want to overwhelm them for them to say, well, they want me to switch, so I have to switch, when they truly do need it.
Just a general purpose question. We started off talking about investing in people. Is it working? I mean, when you look at the chart, we have a lower employee contribution. Everyone else is at state max. I think state max is 12. Is it 15? 12. Yeah. And so we really have better numbers pretty much across the board. So we're talking about investing in people. So is it working?
On the health insurance side.
I mean, that means we're able to recruit and hire diverse staff and all that. So, and how do we verify whether or not it's working? Because if it's not working, then we're pretty much talking economics. Right? So then we should be thinking about most bang for our dollar.
I would have to say, we do seal the deal with health insurance a lot. There are many people that our team works with that have offers out there for 2 to 3 places, and we talk to them about how awesome our benefits are, and that does seal the deal.
But every year we seem to have the list of unfilled positions. But I guess it's hard to contribute how this actually contribute to that.
That's a bigger HR question.
Well, but this is a big piece of it, isn't it? I'm just curious if it was working.
Yeah, and in terms of the data and like if we would have information that specifically points to is health insurance keeping people or contributing to the fill rates. I don't know that we are being that precise right now in our data gathering. What I will say is our exit interviews ask a series of questions, and we're moving to actually doing stay interviews, which is much about asking people why it is that they're committed to being here. So I appreciate the comment and think that there certainly is opportunity for us to get specific about what is it that's keeping you here. I don't know that we ever thought about specifically asking the question about health insurance, but we certainly could entertain.
Yeah, and I was going to try to pull up the HR report real quick, but generally, I mean, some districts are not filling their teaching jobs, right? I mean, we have some areas that are hard to fill, but generally we have applicants. We're certainly not in the situation that some other districts are in. Our retention rates are still strong. Actually, they were slightly better this last year than the year before, so they're trending in the right direction, we think, and it was already better than the national average. So we should take a look at that again, but I don't know. I mean, it certainly seems like that has something to do with it. I certainly hear employees say how much they love their health insurance benefits. So, and I remember when we worked with Monica Rosen, and she did our HR review, she did warn us that our health insurance benefits are a distinguishing factor, right, at least based on her analysis, and that we need to make some of these plan design changes, but we also want to distinguish ourselves. And I think I've heard you say that before, Kate, too, which is why you don't see a proposal to change the employee premium contribution like others have. I think we stand out because of that. I'm actually quite proud of it. I do want to point out, as long as I've got the mic, just really quickly, that I just want to make sure these guys are getting what they need, because we do have another discussion coming after this. When do you need to be moving on this stuff? I think that's important for the board to know.
Yeah, I mean, I think we're essentially ready to move forward. I mean, we have the support from MTI.
Yep.
We've had these conversations. We've worked together. This is our recommendation. This is our path forward to the 2.5 million that we need to hit in terms of our goal and our benchmark. So if there's something here that we're not seeing, or that you're just not feeling, right? I mean, there certainly is opportunity, as we shared the other options below the deductible and the EPC. There's other options that are on the table. We're just saying, based on the conversations that we've had with MTI and our employee partners, that this is the recommendation that we all feel comfortable with, and that is why we see that as our path forward.
So let us know now if there's a big issue here.
I just need some clarification on the other two options. The 100 to 300, I noticed that only one other plan had that. There's 100 to 200. And do you know what savings that would cost us? Or get us?
Yeah, it cuts it in half, pretty much. If we
So
switch to
125?
100.
1.25?
Yep.
And I'm assuming this is 100 is an individual, the other is family, just so everyone's clear. The other thing, did you mention that a 1% EPC would be like, perhaps NSCA would be at $60 from 30 to 60, a $30 increase per month?
That is looking at the point of service plan specifically, not the EPC under the other options section.
Well, okay, 1% additional copay for a staff would be about how much a month? You don't know. But, okay, the deductible is $100 per year.
Yes.
Or $200 or $300 per year.
Yes.
As opposed to an employee contribution of $30 a month. So a 1 to 200 or 1 to 300, 1 to 300 with $2.5 million savings. And then, so I'm clear I only know how this works for me. When I go get meds and stuff like that, once I hit a certain cap, which for me is 500 on my plan, then stuff starts to go down. So for an individual, once they hit $100, then stuff starts to go down. So they would be out $100 as opposed to say 30 a month or 20 or even 10 a month if we change. So that's how that would work. And any employee contribution increase could be anywhere between $10 to $50 a month, maybe. I'm just trying to get information as to how this works for if there are other costs and other savings we want to get at. That's what it really means. It's a $100 contribution as opposed to per year for a single individual, as opposed to a monthly contribution that could probably end up being more than $100 per year, and similarly for a family. So if that option gets back on the table, that's all what it means.
Here, wait, can you guys
if I'm right.
speak to the,
Yep.
the
So
map?
so I think it's important to know, in terms of the point of service, that is a smaller subset of the full population. So not everybody is on the point of service plan. And do we know exactly how many?
400 people.
So when we talk about making a transition where we're spreading the gap between how much people are paying, whether they're on the HMO or the point of service, we're talking about 400 people sort of making that transition. And when we went from 3 carriers to 2, we said we would have an agreement that we would not have staff that would have to incur that large investment initially, that we would gradually move back to that point. So that's the work that we're trying to get to. And by saying that the folks that are on point of service, we used an example of they're paying $30 a month now, they pay $60 a month going forward. That's again for that small subset of folks that are, which there is a percentage of them that actually don't need that plan. They could get their insurance needs met or their healthcare needs met in network, right? But folks right now are just, because it's so cheap to be on the point of service and go wherever you want, they're choosing that as the option. And so this is much about utilization and moving people, driving people to where they should be. So it's not taking it away from those folks that actually need it, but it's trying to really impact that small subset of the group. And so for those folks who don't need that, to move them back into now.
Deirdre,
I get it. It's complicated, and it's I get it.
Can I just want to make sure that I understood. My understanding of your question, Dean, was different, which was of our other options, if we were going to do a deductible or a, say, 1% employee premium contribution increase, which one is worse for our employees' pocketbook? And so that's the way I understood that question.
But essentially. Okay. And also, I didn't quite get that. You're talking about the other options only apply to POS people?
No.
Well, then I didn't quite understand your answer. I don't think you were answering the question I was asking. I'm just talking about the 2 other options. Across the board, everyone who's got our health care plan, if we include the deductible, it's $100 to $300 a year, and after that, everything else kicks in. And what's the better deal? But it seems like, and if we add a 1 or 2% monthly, that would probably add up to more than $100 or $300 a year. And if they take the hit, we get so much better payback on the 2.5 as opposed to 1.8. So what's the, so that's what I was talking about. The POS, I got that one. I don't want to talk about.
Perfect.
I think you.
Right.
I think
so
yeah.
Of the other 2 options, if we were to go to another option and we had these conversations, I think MTR and our partner group would say the deductible would be the more favorable next option at a 100 to 200.
Yeah, that would make sense because.
How is that possible when the savings is so much more for the deductible?
Yeah,
I'm not sure.
Well, that's the calculus that gets complicated, and I think it has to do with use.
Yeah, it's not.
You
We're
know,
not talking
and
about savings.
they got it figured out that way, and that seems to be a better way. If we ever end up going that way, it would seem to be better to do that than having everybody pay more, which would end up, if you're single, more than likely be more than $100 a year, as opposed to, and even $300 for a family. It'd probably be way to go, and somehow out of it, according to their calculus, we get a better savings off of it. So
We have
I don't know. I don't know if we want to do that. I think I'm cool that we got to this right now.
All right,
with
they're going to
that,
explain
but-
to us because we're all confused.
Can we get like
Who wants to try to explain it? I think I'll take an attempt.
Okay.
So if we look at that deductible plan, we're getting $2.5 or $2.6 million in money that comes back to the school district. But our employees are going to be paying $100 out of their pocket, and it's going to go back to the insurance carrier. So it's kind of moving our money around. They're paying more to the doctor, we're getting more back in premiums. The difference between the 100-200 and the 100-300 is our family plan covers more than one person, right? So a 100-200 plan would be an employee and their spouse, or their employee and a child hitting that deductible. 100-300 would be employee, spouse, child hitting that deductible. So when we add in that one more person, that gives the insurance plan more ability to drive care to the right places and less people wanting to spend money out of their pocket in not so smart, maybe healthcare needs.
Yeah, and I'm assuming that the family plan is cumulative, not individual.
It's both.
So
it's,
everyone has to spend $300 before the.
nope, everyone spends $100. 100, 100, 100, up to 300.
Oh, so if one family member uses 300, then you got to wait for the others to use 100?
One family member gets to use 100. All three added together are 300. So you could have two family members that use up 200, and if no one else goes to the doctor, then that missing $100 just doesn't. It's gone.
So you don't. So then you lose you keep paying the extra. All right, I get it.
All right.
You don't.
Gloria, you've been waiting a long time. Are you done?
I just have a quick question about
Yeah.
the retirees. So what other districts have that option? Do you know? I mean, do we have a comparison of what other districts offer?
All of the other districts in the area offer retiree coverage.
Okay.
And it's built into the plan.
Okay.
I have one.
Do you have any others, Gloria?
Nope, that's it.
Okay, Nikki.
I'm sorry, I wasn't trying to cut you off.
No,
Rich.
you're fine.
Quick question. Now I gotta think. Actually, it's a statement. I'm just gonna say where I am because you asked.
Yeah.
I respect your work, respect MTI, but I did make a promise when I started this job on the insurance that I couldn't support deductible. I'd get rid of a raised point of service, so I have to vote against it because that's what I vowed, and I tend to keep it. But I admire the work, and I thank you for it.
I was going to close us out.
Can I say one more thing before you close it out, Kate?
Mhm.
I do want to point out the obvious, since no one else has said it, and that is that while the options that are recommended would help us meet our budget goal, right, and our budget would balance in terms of what we've allocated, at least in our budget assumptions, the board has a choice to make. I mean, if you wanted to add, for example, the deductible, $2.5 million, that is money that you can put back into compensation in another form.
Understood. Yep.
So just in case it didn't occur to anyone, it just reminds me of the conversation we just had about reallocation. This would be an example of reallocating within the compensation budget to be able to further the cause toward base wage.
So maybe.
Or for another purpose.
Yep. No, and I mean, I would expect that will be one of the things in April potentially that you guys come back with. I mean, I was maybe going to close out. I think this is good work. It sounds like you've been engaging with MTI throughout. I do think our healthcare is a big differentiator for us in the area. I'm fully supportive of your 2 recommendations. When we look at some of the areas to repurpose and other savings, I would like to see other options in addition to these. I fully expect you'll bring these back. But to me, these are very much things to protect, just as ways to entice people and keep good people. So I'd like to see other options as well as our.
I like the table that we did last year with the A, B, C, D, E options.
Okay, we got a second discussion. We've got a second discussion, so thank you.
Sorry.
Let's talk about facilities.
Okay, thanks,
this
you guys.
This is a shorter deck, so.
Yeah, we're going to keep this really short and sweet, just so we can get your direction. We're essentially asking for permission to continue on this next presentation.
We'll have a shorter budget presentation next time.
We sure we don't want to go a little farther into the calculus behind copays?
You think you could do this in 5 minutes?
I think this is going to be a lot more clean cut.
Let's go fast.
Nice and quick. All right, we're here tonight to give you a quick update on the work we're hoping to continue related to alternative sites and facilities. So I've got John Harper, Karen Stocks-Glover, and Kelly Ruppel, who's been here all night with me. I got the flipper even, so we can go through it. So quick goals for the presentation. One is to just update everyone on the challenges related to facilities and alternative programs. I see Mary is over here. Mary Jankovic, who is our Capital West principal, is on the phone or email with me probably on a weekly basis, and rightly so, advocating for her students. We lease essentially a storefront for her school right now, and the fact of the matter is, I think it makes poor fiscal sense, and it's not what our kids deserve. And that's really why we're here tonight, to hopefully solve some of those issues, hopefully kill 2 birds with 1 stone. We've got Karen here who's going to give a brief presentation on our vision and the future we see for Capitol High, which definitely has facilities implications. And we'd like to start to obtain your support to research facility improvements and, for the most part, facilities stability when it comes to our alternative sites. We've done a lot of hopscotching around to leased facilities, spent money reinvesting in those facilities to try to renovate them, and lots of times then abandon a lease and look for a new place, and it doesn't make any sense. So we kind of want to get out of that business. So you've seen this slide before. I won't spend a ton of time here, but we've got 5 big work streams that we've continued to touch on with our long-range facilities work. And I think that the key word in that middle work stream is stabilize. Stabilize what we're doing with facilities, both with Capitol High and our special education program sites. Kelly and I also believe that there's the potential to also slip in the ability, maybe with one of these sites, to also do some professional development center, a place that maybe we wouldn't have to, that we could own, and heck, maybe even rent out to others in the future, instead of having to rent as often as we do. And I just want, I want to reiterate on my end, I both as a principal and now the guy in charge of facilities, we have students in our high schools, that was my lens, that were disenfranchised, weren't having the experience that they were looking for, needed something new. And so often we send them to a site that doesn't convey that we're giving them the extra support and the fresh start and really what they need. And I think we can do better. I think we can come up with a plan to own some sites that we can invest in and build the school around the student instead of trying to shove them into a place that really wasn't meant to be in a school in the first place. So with that, Kelly's going to kind of talk through the financials in terms of where we're at and where we think we need to go.
All right, so before we talk about kind of just the finances, I think I want to acknowledge that for a number of years, Dean and others have talked to us about the costs of the operating leases, how the leases are coming out of our operating budget, and how we would much rather have that funding going towards, students in the classroom. I think where we're at this moment is we now have the instructional vision taking the lead, and that's what we've really been, waiting for. And now that Capitol High, in their new visioning process, has been underway for a couple years now, and they're ready to take the next step to expand seats. John's program over at Olin has now been over there for a couple years and is starting to be able to really solidify their version and our work moving forward. Now it's time for the facilities discussion to come along and follow. So with that said, as Chad mentioned, Capitol High West is one of our most expensive leases on a square foot basis, at $20 square foot. It's a pretty expensive lease. But we're also paying for all the utilities and other costs. So with that lease coming up around the July 2020 mark, now is the time to start looking and to start thinking about what opportunities might be out there. We wouldn't want to miss this time and have to just automatically renew the lease because we didn't do the work. Somewhat similarly, but a bit differently, on the special education alternatives, as John's starting to solidify his vision, Olin is a space that really has not had a lot of work done on the environment with which kids are operating in. And knowing that lease is maybe not in 2020, but still around the corner, we want to be thinking about how we can best support that program and those particular kids. And so doing some of this work at the same time helps for us to think about a greater vision and how the moving parts might align. It does happen to also be a fairly significant lease for us. At $243,000 a year, that's $15 a square foot. We do pay the custodial work over there, but don't have any of the additional kind of other utility costs. So while this is a potential savings, on the operating side, it is the instructional vision that's leading. And what we're really hoping for is a win-win, both for instructions and for operations, and potentially a win-win-win if we can find the right space and the right moving parts to tackle some of our professional development needs as well. If the opportunity's there, we'll take it. If not, it's not something we're going to force in.
All right, so building on our conversation from last week, just a quick reminder here. Currently, we have 4 program locations at the Olin Avenue site, 3 of which are exclusively for students with disabilities. We have Primary Steps, which is our therapeutic day option for elementary age students. We have Next Steps, which is a therapeutic day option for middle school age students. Neon, a program for students with more significant emotional behavioral disabilities. And we have Restore, which is our expulsion abeyance program. All said, that's approximately 45 to 50 students that you'll find there per day. So for many years, our students in our intensive intervention programs have been displaced or forced to move from one program location to another through various reasons, being unavailable or the program location is changing focus, if it was a community center, if it was a other lease space. Through consolidation, these programs have realized greater stability and consistency. And I would say that this has really offered us numerous positive benefits. For example, as we consolidated these 4 programs into this singular space, and while they each have their own individual space, it is creating a mini school feel to it, which is really different from how students have experienced their educational opportunities in a strip mall, in the basement of a building, and so forth. So we're seeing much stronger school identity from our students. We're seeing much stronger feelings of belongingness. And I know that this is in a direct result of the work that we've done to create actual, very nice classrooms. We've created individual program spaces, and we've created large open spaces so students have an opportunity to move around. So, and this is the first time that our students in our off-campus programs actually have hot lunch, warm lunch. Prior to this, they've never had a hot lunch in any of these programs. So that's what some of these efficiencies of scale can bring to us. And while this may seem like a small thing, it's gone a long way in creating conditions of a thriving school. And last, I'll just end here. Sorry about that.
Do you want me to give you some water?
I think I can finish this 2 more sentences and then I'll leave it at that. So building on the request from last week, you had asked, like, what specifically are we lacking? We are lacking a therapeutic day option for high school age students. And I would say that we're in the very initial stages of planning for such a program. Expansion is very much contingent upon additional space. That's a given. We do not right now have a program location. So space is really the next big barrier for us. And I'll leave it there for questions.
Just, yeah, keep going. Finish, wrap up. Okay.
So last week we talked about the need for more high-quality options for our opportunity youth, our students who haven't been served in the traditional high schools. And I'm here to represent Capitol High and the work of Capitol High, which is most certainly becoming one of the best options that we have in the city for students who are looking for another way to do high school. We serve currently about 172 students on 2 campuses. Most of those students come to us having already been in the comprehensive high school for a year, but they come overage and undercredited. So we work very hard to help them build that identity as not only high school graduates, but also college-going students. And in that process, we're also learning as we begin to really firm up our instructional design and post the results that you see there on this slide for our students. More and more students are actually electing to come to us as 9th graders, and Capitol High will be the only school that they know, the only high school that they know when they graduate from high school in Madison. Again, our demographics are up there, currently serving 172 students. We want to grow to 300 or 350, depending on the site and the period of time. We wanted to be sure that we shared our demographics with you so that you can also see that the majority of the students that we currently serve at Capitol are students of color, and again, posting really good graduation results for those students. Our instructional design is built on this equity vision that we created that has been reliable and robust all these years. We wanted to be sure that we shared that with you so that you can see our commitment to that personalized learning, that idea of being a student in a supportive community and helping our students graduate on their individual pathway. So leaving us with a post-secondary plan and a pathway to what happens after high school. We have 4 equity drivers that that are the central to our instructional design, and those we use to pressure test every decision that we make about how we serve students at Capitol High, recognizing that our competency model is one of our strengths going forward. This again allows us to provide students with the opportunity to master skills and to show their progress in those skills through a benchmarking system with a graduation by portfolio model. Currently, our students, when they do graduate, receive their diploma from their comprehensive high school, their home school, and it is our goal to be a diploma granting institution using that graduation by portfolio model moving forward. Our experiential learning design allows us to ensure that students are not only learning within the brick and mortar of our 3rd floor of Lapham or our strip mall on the west side, but they're also out in the community learning in other arenas with community partners. We did a couple of focus groups in order to think about what would be some key facility needs for us moving forward. Those focus groups included our students and certainly our staff as well. And what you see before you are sort of the 5 high priorities that resulted from that. Resoundingly, we see the benefit of a 1-location site for us, central to Madison with easy access to transportation. We're really interested in pursuing options in terms of year-round access and the potential for year-round school or access to year-round school, particularly in that competency model and graduation by portfolio model. We also would like to have a space, if you see our spaces now, we're very crowded. We'd love to have a space where we have more flexibility and multiple use. Our students have identified some key areas of interest for them, including recording and culinary arts. We're very interested in continuing to create those community partnerships and have the doors of Capital be open to our families and our students and community partners to share in that space with us. We're also very interested in pursuing ways in which we can offer childcare on site. We have a number of students at Capital who are pregnant and parenting teens, and we don't want the childcare to be a barrier for our students, and we want to also open our doors for students who would benefit from that overall. And then finally, we want to be sure that we have a solid college and career center for our students. Again, looking at the percentage of students who applied to college last year, those who are attending, we know that our students can and will succeed in post-secondary education, and we want to be sure that we have the systems in order to support that.
So I'll attempt to summarize and wrap us up here. So John spoke to, I believe, how our current site at Olin was beginning to meet his needs, probably better than his programs, the facilities for his programs have in the past. And Karen spoke to the fact that Capital High would actually like to consolidate a site to one site and then have the ability to grow as far as capacity. So we're here tonight to get the nudge to move ahead with trying to solve both those visions in terms of their programs. We believe the first step would be to explore the purchase of a property as Kelly prefaced before, potentially using TID funds or a short-term loan to meet the needs of our special education students, where we've got that $250,000 lease sitting out there, and see if we could potentially buy something. We actually think it's possible to maybe buy something that even has professional development space in it. Capital High, on the other hand, and we're interested in your feedback tonight, if we want a single site for 300 students, which many of the features Karen spoke of, a community meeting space, probably a more full-scale cafeteria, a career and college center, some lab space. That's starting to sound more like a full-scale school, and we would either have to do one of two things: repurpose a site we already own and then completely renovate it, or potentially kind of mesh it into the lead item that we think will exist on the 2020 referendum, which is the high schools. And Capital High is our fifth one that we would potentially look at fixing, renovating, or coming up with a stable solution through the referendum. So that we've got those two moving pieces. And then, as I mentioned before, continue to look at a professional development site. So if we get a good nudge tonight, I think our next steps would be to start to go look for properties, probably get a realtor on board, and then give you periodic feedback on how that's going, and go from there. So we are interested in feedback, questions, and next steps.
Yeah, thanks. Nikki corrected me earlier today that I goof up my analogies and metaphors. So I think what I'm about to tell you is a metaphor. I grew up in an urban area. I've worked in urban areas my whole life. We are in an urban area. We are in an urban school district, and when we say that, it's just not a dictionary definition of it. There's things that are attached to urban school districts that Waunakee doesn't have, and many of our other surrounding districts don't have. We have urban issues here, and one of the things I learned growing up and living in urban areas is that I drive with a heavy foot, and I'm not here to nudge you. I think we should drive with a heavy foot on this area and speed it up. And one thing that I know we've talked about, which I think needs to be added into one of the recommendations here, is that we've got land that we could build a building on. Right now, we don't have to buy it. We could just build it. There's 10 that we've identified with enough square footage to build all the building big enough to spec. We could spec it exactly the way we want it, which would be really cool. So transferring these things, the savings in rent alone will pay for the mortgage if we have to take out a loan. And then eventually the mortgage goes away, so this is all rent money that then goes into the big pile that we can decide what to do. So there's savings all the way around, and we increase the number of kids to what you want. And if it works, then we could even reproduce it somewhere else. So that's I don't think we should just I don't think this is something we should nudge along. We've been nudging too long on this, talking about it for years. Ever since 6 years I've been on here, it's just, we should speed this up and make some commitments. And I would, if I was here another year, I'd insist we make decisions. So I'll insist now for the next month that I am here that we should do these things and do them quickly.
And yes, that was a problem.
TJ.
Just a few kind of questions, comments. I'm not quite sure how they fit in. First off, in general, I think that I want to know more about the portfolio competency model, which is not what this discussion about. This is about facilities. But related to that is the single site recommendation. And I want to know more about that also, given the great difficulty of public transportation in Madison, and how that impacts who enrolls in Shabazz, among other things, in our own district, but also, so I understand that 2 sites is not ideal for a lot of reasons, be it school identity, be it efficiencies of support staff and services, psychologists, social workers, things like that. But I also, I ride the bus. I know the realities of that. It can take literally an hour and a half to get from one side of the town to the other, maybe 2 hours. And especially many of the Capitol High. I actually ride the bus with many Capitol High students. Sometimes I just listen to them and don't tell them who I am. Sometimes I talk to them and tell them who I am. It's interesting. It's good. But anyway, these are real challenges. And so I really, that's a recommendation that I have, I want to know more about before I'm comfortable with it. Secondly, wow, Olin Avenue, that's $4,000 to $5,000 a student that we're paying. That's a lot. I mean, Kelly broke them down, or Chad broke them down in a different way, but I'm breaking it down to $4,000 to $5,000 per student, depending on how many students we have enrolled in Restore, basically, is what puts it there. That's a lot of education dollars being spent on floor space. So I'm just going to kind of leave that aside. And then the third thing is that whatever, I agree with Dean, we need to take care of this, and we need to take care of both of these things. But whatever recommendations come before us, whatever kind of things go forward, I want them to include using underutilized space we have in the district, and if that means redrawing boundaries. I mean, we have a lot of underutilized space in the east area, some in La Follette, some in Memorial, less in West, but we have it all over town. And if it means redrawing boundaries and taking a wing of an existing school and turning it into a therapeutic day school or something like that, I really would like to know what that costs as opposed to buying land and building a new facility, and what combinations. And the costs do include perhaps redrawing district school boundaries and things like that to create the space in a school. But I think that if we want to be good stewards of the investments that we've been trusted with, that needs to be on the table, or some set of those options need to be on the table.
So I'm going to jump in after you, because it's quite similar. And Kelly knows my feedback on this, but similarly, I struggle a little bit with acquiring new space when we have quite a bit of space in the district. And so I could imagine this getting wrapped into the referendum as a part of differentiating, we're exploring a lot of ways right now outside of the things that we're talking about in this presentation to differentiate our offering for kids, right? Through Opportunity Youth, we've talked, we keep talking a little bit about 4K, we keep talking a little bit about maybe arts magnet or something like that, right? Like there's a lot of things we're talking about that would require more differentiated spaces. East, I mean, I just pulled up the latest capacity report. The East area, there's not a school, middle school or high school that's over 60-something% full. East is under 60% full. It was 58% at capacity. So we've got space, and we're not growing as a district from students. But we do need to use our space better and differently, and it certainly needs an overhaul and an upgrade to be relevant for the instructional practices that you want for Capitol High, and that also we want to explore for a lot of other things. So for me, this is a much more holistic exercise around differentiated instructional offerings, which I very much want to explore with all of the speed that Dean is talking about. But I don't see the need for new sites here or a new build. I would be open to exploring boundary changes, et cetera, to use our existing space better. You look confused, Chad. So yeah, please.
And you guys can certainly hop in. I hear you loud and clear that we want to be efficient and that we do have space, in particular in our east side schools. I also have my old principal hat on and know that sometimes a student needing a fresh start, that fresh start we can't be in the same building.
Understood.
And that's a factor. To chunk off a wing, the lower level at East High School, and say that that's the new Capitol High East.
Boundary changes might unlock different answers.
Not that they're easy. And there, I think some of the things that Karen bumps into already. So to put an alternative at a wing of an elementary school, of a high school alternative, that's kind of what we want to get out of. That's what we've got going at Lapham. Then I think the other way to go is actually closing an elementary school for an alternative. Is kind of what I'm hearing. So we can look at that. I'm just the old principal in me. Sometimes, you have a set of kids that just need a fresh start with fresh adults and some fresh scenery.
Sorry.
Go ahead.
I would have to agree with both Kate and TJ. I was at Capitol High. I visited this year the east side one, not the west side one. I understand the need for more space. I understand the need for building. I'm not comfortable with building a new one when we have existing properties that would like to know what space can be utilized. And I think you can use new people. You can revitalize areas without it damaging the student, and I'd like to explore that fully before I'm comfortable with new space.
Gloria.
So I just, I think we have to, I get the efficiency and looking at budgets, but we have to look at what we value and where we're going. And I don't see that we have spent the budget around this segment of our student body. And as our city grows, as the needs become more complex, and we have to think further than just today and a temporary fix. I think our students deserve better, particularly these students, and we need to think about how we can build a school for them, catered to them. We have neglected, I think, their needs and their accommodations for years, and this is an opportunity for us to think more so what we've neglected to do in the past and how we prepare ourselves as a city and a community in the future. So that's what I have to say. I think that I do support looking at opportunities and where to build a new building. I think our students deserve that.
James, did you want to? No.
Yeah, I would lean with Gloria on this. I think that we need to address the issues. This would be, particularly if this was a school for 300 students, is going to be a really big investment. I do think, though, that having the environment, having the support where students who are not thriving But I would target that it's not about making an alternative program for kids who are somehow are the traditional high schools are meeting their needs just fine. I think this, but a place where they feel supported, they thrive, they're engaged, I think is important. I think it really is about finding alternatives in which they will thrive. And I'm not sure exactly what that looks like, but I think it's time for Madison to have alternative programs that support the students in an environment in which they want to be. And it's not just housed someplace where we have some room and they're tucked away. I think then they feel like they are second-class citizens rather than going to someplace where they every single day wake up and get excited about the environment and the people who see their potential in an environment that looks like that's recognized.
Can I just, I mean, maybe it's just a question, because we have a couple of clear alternatives here that were a part of this agenda, right? But there's a lot more that we've, as a group, been talking about through kind of our innovation process and pilot process that all have space needs. And I just wonder how you think about, I mean, maybe Gloria's disappearing under too. Just be curious how you think about those as well, because for me, those they need space almost more so because there is none at all right now. I don't know.
I think it goes back to what Kelly said about where there is a clear instructional vision and we're ready to move fast.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, this conversation is triggering me in all kinds of ways because we are so ready to move fast on this. I mean, the Capitol High team, several who are in the room tonight, I mean, you can see that their vision is being actualized and their outcomes, and we've never seen those kind of outcomes coming consistently from the Capitol High team and their students. I went to their graduation. You were there too, right, Mary, last year? I mean, it's phenomenal. I think that they deserve a major investment in this school. And I mean, I totally appreciate the efficiency conversation too. And we certainly need to do that. And I don't think we're necessarily asking for a brand new building. Maybe that is what we come up with, but I think what we're asking for is permission to seriously explore what would be the right approach for this school. It could be that we have a space, right, available. I mean, we've already thrown around a couple of options that are worth exploring. Maybe there is a space that we could buy and renovate. We just want permission to explore because we have an instructional vision. It's already there. We just need to put it, they'll never be able to fully actualize it. They're not in a space that was created for their students and for their program, which is different from a typical school. I mean, I've got friends in other districts around the country who have spaces that were built for this purpose, and it's, I mean, absolutely phenomenal. I mean, talk about a distinguishing factor. That would be phenomenal for our kids. And I think the same thing goes for what John is trying to do with these therapeutic day options, right? If you could find a space that we could purchase that has nearby other kind of support that would benefit the students, for example. Yeah, I mean, there's an instructional vision, right? It's coming together. We're producing better outcomes for kids. We just want to be able to fully actualize these programs. The other ones, right, we're still experimenting and learning, and as those instructional visions come to life, there'll be more that we can do. And we'll cross that bridge when we get there. But we're just asking for permission to seriously explore at this point. And we'll come back to you by June with real options, and you guys can say yay or nay. But that's what we want right now.
I respect everything that's been said. I respect the work. We have a budget hole. We have our teachers that we're not giving more than 0.5%, and I want to do what's best for the students, but I will not do it on the backs of our teachers, and that's what this is asking.
Nikki, no, we're not asking that. I'm sorry.
When we're going to extend and look at buying a new building, when we can't meet our obligations, how can it not?
Nikki, we've got TID money. Kelly already said that. That is one-time funding. You can't use it on salaries. That would be an inappropriate use of that funding. So, yeah, so we've got TID money sitting there, and we're just talking about exploring for the 2020 referendum. So we're not talking about taking pay out of teachers' pockets.
Yeah, actually, teacher was before me, but
I think everyone at the table does want to explore options. Some of us, or at least me, would like those options to include an analysis of existing buildings and recognizing that this might include redrawing attendance boundaries and even the possibility that Chad raised that no one wants to talk about, which would be repurposing / closing a school. But recognizing that, but just that among the choices that and options that are before the board with an analysis.
Thanks, TJ.
And another question I have is, would we fold in the concept of the micro school into this? I feel if we are reaching these students and have alternatives early on in their careers, we will not have the issue of large numbers of students who are disengaged. I think that would be what I'd want to see, is that there is the capacity for that, and we don't have another location where now they don't feel like they have the support and the environment in which they thrive.
All right, Dean, quick.
Okay, well, just a reminder, historically, this group always gets dismissed, always gets thought of last and easily ignored and put somewhere. So this proposal is not going to be at the expense of other things. It's going to be along with and given the priority it should. So it's not about taking away from somebody else to do this. That's what's been done to this group historically throughout the country. So let's not think that we're going to by supporting this proposal, we're going to take something else away from somebody. We need to add this, because we get this right, our school, all of the benchmarks, all the scores, everything will start going up. You get this right. So that's what we're talking about here, not about taking away or at the expense of staff and other things. So that's just want to make my parting shot here. Over the next couple weeks, I'm going to be leaving some parting shots, is that this should be a high priority. We do this right, our school district will improve and will be looked at as really getting at a lot of our issues.
I'm just going to add, but for the benefit of my team, I appreciate what Jen said about our instructional design. This is the 3rd year of Capitol High, and my team has been working diligently to change the narrative for these students. They have done awesome work. They go above and beyond every day, not only in their daily instruction, but in their commitment to a vision, in their commitment to the ways in which we serve students in both of our sites. And we really appreciate all of the time and effort that you will put into seeing what the future can look like for us in terms of facilities. But we also have a motto at our school, which my staff hears me say all the time, which is that we will continue to do the work of instructional design and changing the narrative, and someday the building will rise up to meet us. But we do not stop, and we will not stop.
Thank you very much. Anything else from anyone? All right. Motion to adjourn?
Second.
Ahmad, your advisory vote?
Aye.
All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? All right, we are adjourned.
It's okay. You know when you reference the capacity thing, I was thinking.